They must be busy working. They are custodians at Bellevue, and it says, good afternoon, Dr. Holmes. I would like to pass on our sincere appreciation for the outstanding support provided by you, your staff, and the staff of Bellevue Elementary School over the summer months. The ability to base our summer recreation program out of the school was a huge success. Without a doubt, our program success is a district reflection of the outstanding support provided by the Blaine County School District. In particular, I would like to personally recognize Jeff Jones and Johnny Servin. They were there when we needed their support, and they willingly took on every challenge presented before them. They are a great addition to the Blaine County School District. It's through collaborative relationships such as this that helps inspire, engage, educate, and empower our community. These types of relationships make the Wood River Valley a great place to live, work, and raise our families. Higher Ground Sun Valley looks forward to strengthening this superb relationship in the years to come. Thank you to the Blaine County School District for your support. Submitted by Rich Cardillo, Director of Operations, Higher Ground Sun Valley. And just to give a little more context to that, some of their students that receive summer programming from them, which are also our students, we based that program at Bellevue Elementary this summer and shared our facilities with them. All right, the next accolade is for Jamie, and I saw him sneak in earlier. There he is. Stand up, Jamie. Jamie Ellison, he is the Voice 2 special education teacher. Life Changer is the nickname that I would have given to my colleague, special education teacher Jamie Ellison of the Voice 2 program in Hailey, Idaho. Vocational, Occupational, Independent Community Education 2, that's what VOICE stands for, so you can see why we call it VOICE, is an innovative, nationally recognized community reference program within Blaine County School District. Through the Voice 2 program, Mr. Ellison teaches critical life and vocational skills to students with disabilities aged 18 to 21 in order to prepare them for life after high school. Federal law is clear. Disability is a natural part of the human experience and in no way diminishes the right of individuals to participate in or contribute to society. Improving educational results for children with disabilities is an essential element of our national policy of ensuring equality of opportunity, full participation, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency for individuals with disabilities. Mr. Ellison's work through the Voice 2 program is living proof that students with disabilities can realize their goals and dreams through meaningful educational opportunities. Mr. Ellison's group of students is eclectic. The individuals who attend Voice 2 have a wide range of abilities, passions, goals, and personalities. They have varying medical conditions such as autism, Down syndrome, intellectual disabilities, and rare genetic differences. Each student has individual challenges and their own stories fraught with uphill battles. There is no doubt that these young adults have to work 100 times harder than a typical individual to complete everyday tasks. These challenges make the Voice 2 students stand out. In our society, standing out in a world of conformity is risky. Mr. Ellison has helped shift perspective within Blaine County by immersing his students within the community. In doing so, his students are shining so brightly that others can't help but notice. In the words of Dr. Seuss, why fit in when you were born to stand out? Day to day, I have witnessed Mr. Ellison prove to his students that they are valued. He reassures them that personal goals and dreams matter. He works with each individual to build on the strengths and conquer the fears in a way that is meaningful and enjoyable. Partnerships with the YMCA, Hunger Coalition, Higher Ground, Vocational Rehabilitation, Mountain Rides, and community-based job placements have created opportunities for students to take real-life skills into the real world. He provides the students with opportunities each day to master vocational skills by setting up relevant internship opportunities throughout the community. Mr. Ellison encourages his students to believe in themselves so that they can master independence. His proximity to students during instruction allows for independence as well as respectful opportunities to address behavioral, social, emotional, hygiene, and job coaching needs. This proximity creates an environment of safety without stifling self-advocacy and self-determination. Throughout their experience at Voice 2, students are transformed from teenagers needing significant guidance into adults ready to take on life. In my years as an educator, I have worked with hundreds of teachers across 3 school districts. Through my eyes, it is rare to find a master teacher with the unique abilities that Mr. Ellison possesses. He has a passion for helping his students see the best in themselves. He takes this to the next level by sharing his students' gifts with the community at large. Dakota Ratcliffe, a recent Voice 2 graduate, stated, "In the past, I used to only see my shoes. I always looked down and never looked up. Now I am in a new world. I look around and talk with others. When I look down, it's like seeing a different pair of shoes each day that I grow." While at Voice 2, Mr. Ellison provided Dakota with opportunities to explore his passions, practice independent life skills, gain important vocational knowledge needed for holding a steady job in the community. Dakota's passions for life have been acknowledged at both the state and national levels. Dakota is just one example of the success that Mr. Ellison's students achieve. So often in society, individuals with disabilities are forgotten. How lucky we are to have someone in this world who has poured his heart and soul into these young adults. Mr. Ellison has empowered his students and the community in ways that are unmatched. I think anyone who has worked closely with Jamie Ellison would agree he's a life changer. Submitted by Kelly Choma, and Dakota Ratcliffe also gave permission. Thank you, Jamie. I might have you read this one.
Okay, this one is for the Finance Department. Mr. Mike Chatterton, Val Siemens, Susan Niffen, Communications Department, Heather Crocker and Kelly Martin, Human Resources Department, John Blackman, Jeff Loosely, and Candy Blackburn. Idaho Education News posted an article on October 1st, 2015, titled "Most Districts and Charters Break Idaho Transparency Laws." Idaho Education News reviewed 164 websites belonging to Idaho's 115 school districts and 49 charters to identify which sites were in compliance with the state laws that require transparency in spending, contracts, and long-term strategic planning. Only 14 of 164 websites reviewed are in complete compliance. Blaine County School District is one of the 14 sites listed as being in full compliance with the state transparency laws. Trustee Rob Clayton responded to this article by requesting that recognition be given to the administration and staff members involved in ensuring that Blaine County School District remains transparent and abides by laws put forth by the state of Idaho. With budgetary issues at the forefront of our concerns, it is great to know that we have been identified as one of the most transparent districts in the state of Idaho, as reviewed by the best practices mandated by Idaho State Legislature. All right, I believe that finishes up the accolades, and we'll go ahead and open up with a public comment. And just as a reminder, I have a few submitted already. Ms. LaChance will be having a timer up on the screen to help remind people of the 3 minutes that they're allotted. And we'll go ahead and start in the order that they were received with Ms. Jennifer Schwartz.
My name is Jennifer Schwartz, and I live at 1420 Heroic Road in Haley, Idaho. I'm a parent of 2 third graders attending Haley Elementary School, and I am also the co-PTA president at Haley Elementary. I attended the Finance Committee meeting a few weeks ago and spoke out in favor of separation of the business manager and treasurer position. Unfortunately, I had to leave early from the meeting, but was later informed of the outcome and was also shocked by the voting that took place. Firstly, Mr. Chatterton should have recused himself from the vote. It's very surprising to think that someone would not feel that this would be a conflict of interest, yet he voted. Secondly, I was also informed that John Gaddard is a member of the committee and voted as well. This is someone who has worked closely with Mr. Chatterton over the years and has also benefited to the tune of over $600,000 for contracts that he's been granted from the school district. Also a conflict of interest in my personal opinion. I do not know either of these gentlemen personally, nor do I harbor any ill will towards either of them. I simply think this is an egregious conflict of interest that neither party recused themselves from this vote. The upcoming new financial plan events are another matter that causes me concern. Nowhere in those documents is there anything discussing possible cost cutting. I feel this agenda is being pushed on the public in a manner that is not well thought out and rushed. We have a huge budget. Budgeted revenues for 2015-2016 are upwards of $80 million, yet things such as smaller class sizes are not being adhered to, even though district policy states the association and the board consider a low student-teacher ratio to be vital to sound educational instruction. I am fairly certain that by hiring an independent treasurer, not one selected by the current administration, to avoid bias and aid in transparency, that we would be able to find money to spend on items such as lowering some of our large class sizes, as the board and association say this is vital, and I wholeheartedly agree. I think more vital than administration having cell phones or communications director having a full-time assistant. Thank you for the time that you've given me, and I sincerely hope we can all take a deep breath and do what is best for the district and ultimately our children. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your comment. If you would, please make sure Ms. LaChance gets any written records to be submitted for the minutes. Next, we have Ms. Barbara Mercer.
Can I say right now, excuse my back, I feel real funny. Being a professional developer with my back to people, but that's that. Hi, my name is Barb Mercer. I've lived here 5 whole years, 4.5 actually, and I'm a property owner in the Bellevue Farms. 35 years in public education. Yes, I'm that old. K-12 teacher, reading specialist, literacy coach, professional developer, district administrator, Chapter 1 lab monitor, and a college professor. So I have a little experience in public schools, just that much. And I'm here to support the creating of a treasurer position for the Blaine County School District. I too feel that it is a key principle of sound financial management to have checks and balances built into the system, especially one that is dependent on the taxpayers' money. An organization with an $80+ million budget can certainly afford this position. As elected guardians of the public's funds, to not have this oversight position, I feel could be considered a breach of your fiduciary responsibility. Had there been a treasurer position in earlier years, it is possible that some of the financial debacles of the recent past, and when I say that, I did a little forensic digging into articles about McKinstry and articles about Silverback and articles about Barber, and so I've done my history. And in my opinion, I think poor Sean is the only one who went through all of that, because I look at all these new board members and none of you are here. So I'm feeling like if you had that oversight, you might have avoided some of the considerable savings to the county taxpayers, the county citizens, and to this school district. And I feel like I'm talking millions. The resistance to creating this position certainly makes one wonder if financial oversight is needed. And the we can't afford it really doesn't get it, in my humble opinion. So, in summary, I suggest you hire and support the talent you need and what your constituents who voted for you into office have asked for years, as proof in my looking back at county. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I turned in my red.
All right. Next is Ms. Jennifer Schwartz representing Diane Barker. And just as a reminder, if members of the public community can't be here to read their own comments, they can prearrange for someone else to read those comments for them. And so, Ms. Schwartz.
Okay, Jennifer Schwartz again. For Diane Barker, do you need me to say her address? Yes, 640 Bonanza Lane, Haley, Idaho. Dear BCSD Financial Committee, most of you have read my previous letter to the Board of Trustees encouraging the board to appoint an independent treasurer to the board. That letter clearly denotes my concerns, so I will not restate those concerns here. That letter has been met with one objection from the administration stating that the district could not afford a trustee. I posit that the district can't afford not to have an independent treasurer to the board. The board needs a trusted advisor to help them navigate the budget troubles we are about to experience. I feel confident that the BCSD would not be facing these financial troubles had the board had an independent treasurer or a robust financial committee such as yourselves during the past when incredibly poor financial decisions were made. I would encourage you to consider the following arrangements for retaining an independent treasurer. I list them in the order of most preferable to least preferable. Number 1, hire part-time on a fixed fee basis an individual with financial training such as a CPA or an MBA. I can think of several people who might be willing to take on BCSD for a fixed fee of $2,000 per month and give 20 hours minimum time to BCSD. Number 2, hire part-time on a fixed fee basis an individual with very strong financial bookkeeping budgeting experience who does not have a financial degree. Our community has many accomplished individuals with this kind of experience. Get one of the current board members to agree to become the treasurer. I find this the least preferable because it seems that none of these people have the time to do such an important and time-consuming task. The independent treasurer position is important to help steer the BCSD to a more secure financial future. It is also important, as Trustee Clayton has pointed out, for succession planning. Currently, Mr. Chatterton is the only high-level financial person at the district. He will not be there forever, so it would be best if the institutional knowledge were shared with the treasurer, who could help in the transition when Mr. Chatterton retires. The BCSD faces some interesting budget problems. I hope you, the Financial Committee, will be an active part of the solutions. Sincerely, Diane Barker, CPA. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chad Pringle? I apologize if I butchered your last name.
Pringle, yeah. Thanks for your time. So I did write a letter, and more or less just going to go over that. It's come to my understanding that we have one person, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but one person both in the business manager role and the treasurer. And I just have a hard time thinking this doesn't create a conflict of interest. With all this concern about the budget and how funds are flat, we must seriously consider making them into two, which leads me to another concern, the numbers reported on a yearly basis. Having transparent, easy-to-read information explaining exactly where the funds come from and where they're going, use a template that's simple and stick with the same format each year to easily compare what changes have occurred from the previous report. You can count on me learning more about the other district-level positions that have been created recently, which ones have always been on payroll, and what exactly is the realm of responsibility for each role. Being a parent of 3 young girls, 2 of them now at Hemingway, and seeing class sizes increase while 2 classrooms are now being used for testing leads me to think that we've lost perspective on why each and every one of you are here in the positions you are in. This is and always will be about the children. We do live in a community with amazing resources. That's why a lot of us decided to live here. It makes no sense to me to preach larger class sizes, especially at very young ages when needs of each student can be addressed and nipped in the bud, allowing middle school, high school, and college years to be more successful for each and every child, regardless of their demographic and ability. We are battling with cutting teachers in the school where classes are swelling with students. It's back to the students where the priority should be, on the front lines, the true educators, the teachers in the classrooms. In order to get there, we need to understand where the funds are going. This day and age by default, we must have check and balances. When budgeting with our resources, we are battling with class size. Leads me to think that allocation of monies needs to be recorded clearly, stated where they are going. What is the total amount we have to work with, and what is going out the door before addressing the students that are priority 1. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Pamela Plowman.
My name is Pamela Plowman. I'm a Haley resident, and I'm feeling pretty frustrated listening to all this because I remember, in fact, you were talking about the legal compliance accolade, and it was 2 or 3 years ago when I brought this to share with you tonight. I also sent it to you in your danced emails, but this is what I brought 2 or 3 years ago to the board meeting to say, look what we're spending.
Just as a reminder, this is a meeting for the board.
Okay, so look what we're spending compared to every other school in Idaho, and it's a whole lot more. So since then, we've been on the website working, and that is why it meets full legal compliance, because we have insisted on getting the information that we need, and the school has responded. So the school has benefited by people really looking into our school issues, and I think that's where the accolades go for the school website. I wanted to also talk about this new financial plan that has been sent out with meetings that are happening about finances in the district. And a friend of mine who's a bank manager stopped by and said, I just went to this meeting and I don't understand this stuff. Can you explain it? And I couldn't explain it right off the top of my head, and I spent that evening redoing the graph so that it made sense to me. So this is what I have instead of, and I forwarded this to you guys, instead of this graph. And what it basically does, it takes out about 3 non-essentials, and it compares expenditures to increase in enrollment. And so when you look at the process of the growth of our spending to enrollment is up 5.8%, and our spending is up 16%. That's after accounting for cost of living and increased enrollment. So in other words, 16% of the budget is $5.8 million. So in 2005, if we spent just the same as on, we would be $5.8 million under what our current budget is. So, and it also shows that it has nothing to do with the employees, because the employees are 4.6%, and enrollment is up 5.8%, so employees are actually down. So the expenses, where are they? Tech, buildings and grounds, software, there's a lot of that out there. So, there's a lot to be looked at, and this is not going to take us anywhere. Community people can't help us with this. They look at it and they don't understand it. So I don't think that's helpful at all to take to the community and say, can you give us your opinions? And I have 15 seconds left. The treasurer position separated out. I looked back over the past, and a big egregious error by the planning for the levy was this, which shows the difference in projected, this is what projected enrollment was at the time of the levy by the school district. I don't know if it was the business manager or what, but, an algebra student could have driven that line.
All right, thank you for your comments. We appreciate
It's very
it.
frustrating, and, so we're revisiting all of this right now after 2 years. So please, get a treasurer position in addition.
All right. Next up is Miss Callista Phillips, I believe, representing Lyman Drake.
Hi, I'm Callista. Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? I'm Callista Phillips. I'm representing Lyman Drake. He is out of town and asked me to come and read this for you. This is on behalf of Lyman Drake regarding the Finance Committee policy. His address is P.O. Box 4080, Ketchum, Idaho. On the whole, this is a thoughtful policy document that provides useful guidance for the Finance Committee, a.k.a. the Financial Advisory Committee, or FAC. It represents a substantial amount of effort, which I appreciate. In the following comments, I speak for myself, not for the committee, which has not discussed or taken a position on the document. My comments, however, are informed by my experience serving on the committee since its inception. The first item is Article 3, Community Member Appointment Process. It would be a useful clarification to make it explicit that there is no requirement that an appointee reside in the zone of the trustee making the appointment. For example, Trustee Benyon, who lives in Zone 1, appointed me to the committee, and I live in Zone 4, and that is okay. The next is Article 6, Officers. I do not favor the ex officio designation of the board liaison trustee as chair of the Finance Committee. It risks compromising, or at the very least, appearing to compromise the independence of the committee. It puts the liaison member in a position to exercise a greater special influence on the course of the committee's deliberations and on the recommendations it prepares for the board. Any appearance of less than complete independence can undermine the committee's credibility and authority. Allowing it to elect its own chair best ensures its independence. I also question whether the liaison trustee member should participate in drafting our monthly reports to the board. This can be perceived as allowing that trustee to shape the report to more closely reflect his or her own views. We must never become known as, quote, trustee X's committee, end quote. The Finance Committee exists in order to provide a trusted, independent perspective for the board to consider. Please understand that my comments are in no way directed at the committee's current liaison trustee member, who is making outstanding contributions to the committee's work. My argument is structural and stands regardless of which specific trustee happens to serve on the committee. The policy document under review tonight states a single reason for making the liaison trustee the chair of the Finance Committee. It is, quote, to provide a direct channel of communication between the board and the FAC, end quote. That channel already exists by the very fact that the liaison trustee attends FAC meetings and participates in FAC deliberations. That trustee is in an excellent position to convey context, nuance, and texture in both directions. It is not necessary to be chair of the committee in order to do this. For more formal communications, such as assigning tasks to the committee or making recommendations to the board, the preferred channel is between the board chair and the committee chair, perhaps with the assistance of the board clerk. In my experience, boards and committees function optimally when they speak with a single voice, the voice of their chair. Why would this situation call for a different relationship? Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your comments. And last, we have Mr. Keith Severston.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Keith Sivertson. I live at 640 Bonanza Lane in Haley. I've worked as a physician at St. Luke's Hospital here for 16 years, though I'm mostly retired now. My career has been in American healthcare, which is known for runaway cost and suboptimal outcomes. Unfortunately, American education, which is right behind American healthcare, with runaway costs and suboptimal education. I appreciate the time and the effort of volunteer school district trustees. And looking at your consent agenda, I realize you must have each been spending 4 to 8 hours of pre-work reviewing just the consent agenda. School district trustees and administration appear to be launching a campaign to once again request more tax dollars from Blaine County residents. This will be a challenge because previous trustees and administrations have demonstrated poor fiscal constraint. I'm a simple guy. I want to know how many total dollars were spent in the last fiscal year and how many students were educated. This gives a simple cost per student. The school district doesn't seem to like this simple math. 2 currently circulated documents, Time for a New Financial Plan and BCSD value propositions, I suggest are camouflage. The school district communication office appears to be a propaganda office, generating more smoke and fog than sunshine. The trustees are responsible to the citizens of Blaine County. They're entrusted with more money than any of the cities or the county. If more money is needed, I suggest you prove your fiscal responsibility by doing 3 things. Be fully transparent about previous expenditures that in retrospect appear ill-conceived or executed. That's the past. Trim 5% out of this current fiscal year budget and bring forward a budget for the next fiscal year 10% lower than this fiscal year. 3, simultaneously demonstrate a path to greater aggregate student achievement. We don't want everybody to be a doctor and certainly not a lawyer, but every graduating student must have demonstrated basic skills. To achieve these goals, you'll need individuals with sharp business and financial acumen. That experience exists in this community. Buy it as you need it, and be sure there are no conflicts of interest. Remember, you're in the business of education. The buyers of education, that is, the taxpayers, want the best education for the least amount of money. We appreciate your work. We'll be watching. We'll be voting. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. That's all that have been received. Ms. LaChance, have there been any more that have come in? All right. We'll go ahead and move forward then with the superintendent report and turn the time over to Dr. Holmes.
Okay. This evening, our report is actually going to be brought to us by the middle school. Each month, we're trying to bring examples of inspiring, engaging, and empowering students. And I had the pleasure of just getting a little tiny sample of what is going on with the 8th grade team at Wood River Middle School. An example of how they are working hard to achieve our mission and using creativity in their instructional methods. Those of you that were at our opening day with all of the staff back on September 3rd know we talked about the outcomes are non-negotiable. They're given to us by both the state of Idaho and by our community. But how we help our children achieve those are very negotiable. We can be very creative in helping our children get there. And so Greg Wilson, who is English language arts teacher on the 8th grade team at Wood River Middle School, is going to share what his team is doing right now in a unit called Success is Not an Accident, which will hopefully illustrate some of the ways we're working to engage and inspire our students. So, Mr. Wilson?
Great, thank you. One question I have here is it's a PowerPoint, so can I stand on one of the screens and
Either one?
point and talk, and this works probably best for you over
Okay.
here. And maybe you can do the clicking. I'll just grab a mic. Do I need a mic?
Yes, please.
Okay, this is a unit, Success is Not an Accident. Go ahead and click the slide. And it's based on climbing Mount Everest. And as you can see, Everest is cool. It's not a pun, I'm sorry, it's actually very cold. But is it the real deal in the classroom? And so kids are interested in this, but you know, we have certain requirements. We have, does it meet the IB requirement, Common Core, the district's goals, which were just mentioned, inspiring, engaging, educating, empowering. But first, I think we need to look at the evolution of a teaching unit. It comes with an idea, then there's planning, structure, which I'll talk about in just a second in terms of IB being the structure, teaching, then reflection, then unit revision, then teaching, then reflection, unit revision, and then on, a dynamic, never-ending process, hopefully that we're in the constant state as teachers of reflecting and improving the units as we go. This, I don't know if you're familiar with, but this is the structure. This is an IB template. You can see the unit title is Success is Not an Accident. We have a global context, exploration, a key concept, related concept, and these are all tied together. The statement of inquiry that drives the unit is the human capability for success is dependent upon motivation, planning, and persistence. All of these words appear here. Then we have inquiry questions, which also further the unit. And in this case, we have a factual question, how do we plan for success? A conceptual question, how does persistent lead to success? And then a debatable question, in what way is success dependent upon motivation, or upon motivation? So the idea is that kids are wrestling with these questions all of the time. There aren't necessarily answers to this, but we do want them thinking more deeply about these issues. And then there's a summative assessment as well. Next slide, please. And then that's tied into the Common Core. And then next, it's tied into IB assessment criteria. And the next slide, is this inspiring, engaging, educating, and empowering? I've given you the answer to the quiz right here. It's no. So something's missing. Now, if this were a class of inquiry, I'd have you all get in small groups and try to answer this, but we don't have much time. So if you go to the next slide, and the next one, we're breathing life into the unit, this is what I think we need, not only students, but we need teachers who are inspired, engaged, educated, empowered. And I'm surrounded by teachers that in the 8th grade hall. I'm so fortunate, but that's what really brings life to the units. You also need a variety of teaching resources, engaging student activities, and a meaningful final project. The text that we use for this unit is a nonfiction book, Into Thin Air, and then a fiction piece called Peak. If you'll go to the next slide. And again, the unit's on success, and so the internet is ripe with all kinds of resources for motivation, talks, TED Talks as well, films help the kids visualize being on Mount Everest, for example, at the beginning of this year. We took all the kids to the Everest film that was playing in town, and that really helped them see the challenges that are faced by a climber on Everest. Current events, last year there was an earthquake in Nepal. We were able to get outside of our valley and start thinking about other people in other places. Then the kids do a little exploration and look at other people's ideas about success, risk, failure. And then another resource that I happen to have is my experience, if you'll go to the next slide. And this is almost kind of unfair in the classroom because before becoming a teacher, this always surprises kids that I actually had a life other than teaching. And I was 22 years as a professional mountain guide. And all of this stuff we talk about, and I tell stories about this. And right at that point, the hands are waving. So the kids are engaged, they're inspired, they want to know all about this. And I really have to hold them at bay and go, we'll get there soon enough. And in terms of the unit, when we're talking about Everest and reading the books, I've been on seven Everest expeditions, and I've calculated that to be about 2 years of my life living on the sides of Everest. And then I've been to the summit twice, which is pretty cool. But the real lessons are here, the unsuccessful trips. And I bring those into the classroom as well and talk about that. And if you'll go to the next slide, this also gets their attention when I mention that my name is in these books and in the next slide, in these films. And so now you probably think the unit is about me. It's really not. Go to the next slide, please. I've also written a lot about my experiences. There's a selection of stories that I've written, and this allows me to bring the writing process into the classroom. I could take rough drafts of these and take them all the way to some have been published, and then I can tell kids, hey, you too can be a writer. You can actually make some money. All of a sudden they're going, really? I can write for money? Yes, you can. Photography, all the pictures that you're seeing are pictures that I've taken, so I talk about that interest. And then professional guiding, obviously, is something I've done. So again, we're looking at opportunities for kids beyond the norm, and there are a lot of opportunities out there, so we explore that as well. Next slide, please. Activities to support learning. We do a lot of writing. This is informal writing, but you can see some of the topics are why do people take risks? What are you willing to risk in order to succeed? What is success? Again, not a yes or no or right or wrong answer, but plenty of time to spark debate and conversation and deeper thinking for the kids. Go ahead. Additional activities, these are being done all throughout Blaine County. Anchor charts, summaries, reflections, skits, internet searches. Nonfiction book reports actually require kids so that they go beyond Everest and find a subject matter of their own and find someone dealing with a challenge and overcoming that challenge. So it's like Everest, but it can be in a variety of disciplines. It doesn't have to be mountain climbing. It can be any challenge in life. Go ahead. Then the final project. Students determine their own goals, create a plan for success, create a written document. And again, taking it from my experience and turning it back on them. Through climbing, I've developed my own power principles for success. And if you'll go to the next slide, you'll see that I try to instill in the kids the power of possibility, believing that anything is possible, the power of passion, having a passion that drives you each day, the power of planning, preparing yourself to succeed, the power of persistence, never giving up, and then bringing the unit full circle back into the classroom. I ask students to determine 4 goals. In this case, you can see they have an academic goal, a physical goal, social goal, and then a world goal. And I have them put it into the form of a letter. And so this, it says, write your quote here. That's simply taking one of the quotes that they found meaningful to them in their research. And then they write a letter to themselves and say, my academic goal is this, my physical goal is this. And then more importantly, it's easy just to set a goal. But the real question is, how are you going to reach it? So they have to come up with steps that they'll take to accomplish that goal. They address the letter to themselves. A year later, I send the letter to them. And so hopefully they open it up and take a look at it. And it wasn't just an assignment. They look at it, maybe revise their goal or come up with another goal. But it continues striving for success. And so we come full circle. Are the kids inspired and engaged? Everest, it's easy to talk about because it's a very tangible goal. Either you make it or you didn't. And again, it's not all about making it. It's about kind of the striving for success. And then my personal relationship on the mountain really inspires and engages the kids. Then the most important element, I think, is that the unit applies to them. They walk out of the classroom going, I get it. I'm not asking this question. Why are we studying this stuff? Okay, they know why they're studying it because it applies to their lives and they can improve their lives that very day. Next slide, please. Education. This is literally off the top of my head. I'm not sure it's all there, but writing, reading, culture, religion, planning, geography, geology, all these things we touch upon, and I think there's more in terms of the unit. Next slide, please. Empowered, you bet. Design their own goals, design plans to reach those goals, and encourage to believe that anything is possible. And in the end, what I closed the unit with, talking to kids and talking about it's only you standing between you and your dreams, and I try to emphasize that, it's not a destination, but a way of life. And I'm still challenging myself in many ways. And the real key here, I think, is finding passion, which I found in climbing and guiding. Now it's teaching, and that led to success in the mountains and beyond. And success is not an accident, and that's that. I'm not sure we have time for question and answer, but...
Well, I noticed there's some other 8th grade teachers in the audience that were a part of this team. Would they please stand up so we can also recognize them? Come on, Mr. Plumba, quit looking behind you like They kicked this unit off at Old Cutters, and I think the mountain right there, or the hill that's right there, was supposed to represent Everest to some of the kids. And they had a lot of challenges going on that day. But I would like to commend you for taking the opportunity to say, this unit plan that we have, is it inspiring, engaging? And if not, how can we change it to make it inspiring, engaging? Because how we teach is up to us. It's not a mandate from anybody. So thank you for doing that for our students.
Thank you.
And I don't have a data report at this time because we're going to have a big one in a little while. So.
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead with the board chair report, and I'll go ahead and turn the time over to our brand new student liaison, Ms. Carol Hoffman, for her report.
Okay, thank you, Sean. So I'm going to start off with just a quick recap of what's been going on at Cary High School. This week is their homecoming week. However, they'll be postponing their homecoming dance to a following weekend because the volleyball girls wouldn't be able to attend. They'll be at a volleyball tournament. On the 21st, Cary will be having their Cary community meeting, and on the 30th, the school play will have a matinee for the elementary students. Moving on to Silver Creek, the students recently went on a school-wide field trip to Camp Sawtooth, where they had a great time there, and they've also been entering their first official year of their Big Picture Learning curriculum, which helps integrate school learning in a career setting with internships where they attend those twice a week. Their school year's been going really well this year, and the Big Picture Learning curriculum has been going smoothly. And at Wood River, we've been adjusting to a couple changes this year with a new schedule and a new principal, but everyone seems to be adapting really well so far. And this is our 3rd year so far of our advisory program. And I think as the years have continued, we've been starting to see some tangible benefits coming from it, and everybody's really getting into it a lot more and getting close with their classes. Also, a couple weeks ago, we had our homecoming week, which was a big success. We crushed Kimberly at the game, and we had record attendance again. So it's been a great start to the school year, and we're looking forward to the rest. Thank you.
And a great parade.
Yes.
All right, thank you for that report. As far as announcements, to start out with, on this first announcement, I would really like to say thank you to Dr. Holmes, the administration team and the communications department for getting these meetings, this information together in such a short amount of time. We have a variety. We've scheduled about 18 different meetings to invite all of our stakeholders to ask questions, give feedback, and help us as a board identify ways to create a sustainable fiscal plan, as has been mentioned here earlier this evening. Since 2006, our revenues have been flat, been capped. We have not increased. Since 2011, our expenses began exceeding our revenues. So as a board, we're really going out and trying to ask the community, what do you value in the Blaine County School District? To what degree do you value different programming, class sizes? What insights do you have for dealing with the increasing expenses and revenues remaining flat? The majority of these meetings will be held the week of October 9th at various times and locations all throughout Blaine County. As Liaison Hoffman stated, there will be one down in Cary. There's some up at the YMCA. There's at schools, St. Luke's, community centers, at various times, so we can get a very diverse cross-section of our community to come out and give feedback. So please, take the time to come and give feedback. And that, as I mentioned, that will be going on the week of October 19th through the 26th. And for specific time and dates, locations, please visit the district website. On Wednesday, October 21st, we have a policy committee meeting here at the community campus in the mini Moore Room. On October 26th, we have Professional Staff Collaboration Day, where there's no students. We have our Finance Committee meeting on Tuesday, October 27th, at the District Office Boardroom. We have our Wellness Committee meeting on October 29th at 4 at the District Office. As a board, we also have our ISBA Annual Convention in Coeur d'Alene. Trustee Freund, myself, and Dr. Holmes will be attending to represent Blaine County to further our own professional development, as well as help set the bylaws and the legislative platform for the Idaho State School Board Association. Parent-teacher conferences for Wood River High School and Silver Creek are November 13th, and there will be no school that day, as well as Wood River Middle School. There will be no school on that same Friday the 13th. Let's see.
So parent-teacher conferences are on the evening of the 11th and 12th, so some teachers are off on the 13th.
I appreciate you pointing that out. And then our next regular November board meeting has been moved to November 17th at our last meeting here at the community campus in the mini Moore Room so that we can attend ISBA. And I believe that wraps up the announcements, and we'll go ahead and move forward to the business section of our agenda and have the Finance Committee policy. And Trustee Corker, would you mind taking the lead on that?
Sure, absolutely. So I agree with Mr. Drake, and what happened with that policy is I was trying to, this committee is a work in progress. I think that the first year and even now, we're trying to be all things to all people, and it's not, it's diluting the effectiveness of this committee. So it was supposed to be a board committee, so I had a board person be the chair, which is usually what you do when you have a board committee. It was also supposed to be a citizen committee, so I had a majority of citizens on the committee. However, there was also staff on the committee. So it got, as I look at it, I think it became not as effective as it should be. So I would like to propose, and I'd like for the board to strongly consider that this committee should just be a citizen committee. It should be totally independent. They should be able to vote for their own chair. Mr. Chatterton can be the reference person on the committee but would not be a voting member. I could be the reference person on the committee but would not be a voting member. So that's, I think, the direction this committee needs to go in to be truly independent. So there's a few things. It would be pretty easy to change that policy. We don't have a hard copy here, but I don't even know where it is on here. But there's a section about community members, staff members on the committee, and we can just do away with that. We could also do away with, there's just a couple other lines. Hold on one second. So at any rate, I'm sorry, this is 340 pages on our agenda, and I can't find it.
got
So,
it. You want me
okay.
to read it?
Not the whole policy, but there's
Staff
just...
part?
Yeah.
It
Well,
says staff
yeah.
appointments will include the superintendent or assistant superintendent, business manager, 2 staff members selected annually by the superintendent to include 1 VCEA or staff member and 1 school administrator. District superintendent or designee will serve as a staff liaison to the FAC and will be assisted by
Oh,
the
good.
business manager and other staff as needed.
Right.
So that's how it's
Yep,
written.
so we just take that out, and there's a couple of other lines that refer
yeah.
to that, and then change the way that the chair is picked, and done. And I think it's much cleaner, and I think that it's independent. I think it gives us what we wanted, which was leveraging the expertise in the community and the commitment in the community. So I'd like to throw that out there.
I think it's a great idea, and I think hearing what we've heard tonight, that kind of reinforced it to me. I think the independence would be a really positive thing, and empowering the committee, the community members would be great, and to have you as a resource and our treasurer as a resource, but let them make their decisions and vote independently.
What next steps then to rewrite this and
If I could add
Dr.
2
Holmes.
considerations that and I'm not sure this is what's intended, but the committee responsibilities, number 1, where it says review any matters potentially having significant impact on the district finances before Board of Trustees take action, might be a item which causes longer delay on some items, so that might be a consideration. You might want to add some phrasing in there about, is this in general, is this every time, type of thing. So does that delay the board from taking action from 2 months to 4 months, type of thing. And then the other thing I think you ought to consider is under number 3, community members. I'm unclear on whether the board has to appoint from the applicants or not. In all of your committees currently, you take applicants as a way of garnering interest, but you can appoint anybody you want. So did you want this to be aligned with those other policies where you appoint only from applicants, or you take applicants as potential board committee members? So those are the 2 things that stood out at me when I was reviewing it that you might want to consider.
Would there be one step further that was Lyman Drake's suggestion that the people not be bound to district as well?
I don't think there's any,
Is there
I didn't
something
read
further
anything in
that
here
there
that
is?
tied it.
Make sure there's no boundary with this.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
competent people are most important.
So what if you don't have any applicants, or what if you know somebody who's really competent that you want to encourage them to be your representative or something? Are you bound to only applicants? Those were the 2 things that stood out to me in my review.
One of the things that I was also considering is I actually attended the financial committee meeting last time, and this policy came up, and some of them had seen it, some of them had not seen it. We gave them the draft policy, but in their discussions, they also asked to be able to take a look at that. So prior to any, as I go back to my announcements, if I can remember correctly, the next Finance Committee meeting is on October 27th. Trustee Corker, do you think you could have the changes to the draft document that the board is considering at this time made so that that could be put on the agenda with the proper noticing time, so that the Financial Committee as well as public can take a look at those changes, as well as as I mentioned, the Financial Committee, to get back to the board as well, because I felt voice come loud and clear from the Finance Committee that they would actually like a crack at looking at this policy, since it was so pertinent to them.
Sure. So I think that this issue begins and ends at the board, because the committee as it stands now does not, for the reasons that Lyman Drake said, for the reasons that I just said, it does not represent what we wanted in the beginning in terms of membership. So I think we postpone the next meeting. We vote on this in November. And the other thing that I wanted to suggest is, that each person, each board member get have an appointment, and then there be a pool. And I was thinking, I was just thinking, how would this work? There'd be a pool of at-large members that we can all vote on, and by majority vote, the committee would have as many members as we voted on. Now, I don't foresee this committee being that big. We only got 6 people, and one person is off of it right now. So we only have 5 people in the community right now that seem to be interested. If there's more, I welcome that, and I think that they should be at-large members. I guess that would be a term of 2 years, something like that. I'm just thinking on my feet. I do think 1 year is too short. I witnessed that. You barely know what you're talking about, and the first year is gone. So possibly, if we think about it that way, we'll get enough people that there's enough people at each meeting to be able to mull over what's going on. And if you have 5 people only, 2 people aren't there, it's a pretty sparse group. So that's my only suggestion. That was something that I thought that might work. Pretty simple.
Sounds good.
Okay, so our next steps, are you going to be able to take and revise the current drafts document to take into account? And first, I better verify that the board is comfortable and there's consensus on the board to move forward with changing the draft of the document.
Can we recap? So basically what we're saying is that, first of all, board size currently 10. Do you think that's too big, too small?
You mean of the committee?
Committee.
Committee, I mean, yeah. Committee's 10 people.
It's
What's the
about
suggestion
right.
there?
Something,
Okay.
It doesn't have to be a fixed amount.
Okay. So that's point 1. Point 2 would be that the chairman, the leadership of this committee would be appointed by a majority vote of the committee themselves. Okay, that's good. And thirdly was that we would, what was the consideration? That they would be from anywhere within the district and not beholden to any particular location. Those are the changes we discussed.
We can try, we can attempt to get someone from our zone, but we're not beholden. I think that's the idea.
Yeah, I think it's to find qualified people. That's the most
Was there
important
anything else
thing.
that we wanted to, because it all sounds good. I just want to be sure we all are clear on what the points are that will be redrafted.
I just want to be clear that part of this revision of this policy in the making is that they are community members, no staff members or other people who have a conflict of interest.
Well, that was exactly, that's
Okay.
what I'm trying to say, is to take out any conflict of interest, including being on the board and taking that to the board. As I said, I was trying to please everybody. I was trying to be a board committee, I was trying to be a citizen committee. There had been staff on this committee. I was trying to do everything, and in the end, I ended up, I think that made the committee a little bit weaker in this policy, and I think that there's an easy fix. So thank you. I agree.
Oh, one last thing we should actually do, we should have board liaison still, non-voting member but a participant, and administration liaison, non-voting but participant.
Yes.
We need those 2 things as well.
As
Absolutely.
referenced.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And I would recommend, once again, that you relook at item 1, so you don't lock yourself
Okay.
into a position of not being able to respond to emergency-type situations.
That sounds good. And I'll review this. I haven't made notes because I've been talking, but I'll review this part of the webcast and make sure that everything happens.
Okay, and then that will come back before the board
For voting.
for an additional review and possible motion, so, all right.
Just quickly, in this case, we had talked about the policy for the policy committee, and that I haven't been able to get to, and I see it's, I think it's B on here, and I haven't looked at that, but this is one of those very, I think for us as a board, it's a very clear case where we need to be making the policy, and it can't be put off to the policy committee because that's abdicating our responsibility.
All right. I appreciate all the comments made, and we'll go ahead and move forward then with item B under business, the school advisory committees. And just as a reminder, this is something that we discussed last month at our board meeting and had decided, or had tasked Dr. Holmes with talking with the PTAs if they would be willing to morph and fill in the roles of that committee, or whether we needed a whole separate committee. And so, Dr. Holmes, what did you find out after
Okay.
discussing with the PTAs?
At that particular meeting, we try to meet regularly with the PTA officers, we being the district office or district administration. We had 6 of the 7 PTAs represented at that meeting. Cary School currently does not have a PTA. And so in talking to them about serving as board advisory councils or providing information to the board, with the exception of one school, they expressed the concern about being able to provide broad representation. One school felt like that they would have broad representation in their meetings, and so would be able to, whatever they presented to the board, would have broad representation. But they were all willing to give it a go and try to overcome that problem of getting feedback from a broad representation of their parents. The majority of this discussion was around how to really know what kind of feedback to provide the board. Since the board's primary areas are policy, the superintendent, and the budget, how would they know how to give appropriate feedback? And so there was some conversation about whether the board could provide guiding questions or ask for specific information on specific areas that could help guide their conversations. And let's see, make sure I've got it all. Could there be a specific ask for the information? Could the board identify issues that they need the PTAs to address or provide feedback on? So those were the 2 big things, was broad representation, however they were willing to tackle that and try to make it happen. And secondly, was more parameters around what the board wanted feedback on.
All right, thank you, and I'll go ahead and open it up for discussion.
Are we able to ask a member of the public who happens to be on a PTA for any kind of input on that? I know that you're on the PTA, and I'd like to hear if you think that this is a good idea, or you think anybody in your organization is interested, or you're interested.
I think it is a good idea. For Haley, our next step forward is to send out a survey within our school in both English and Spanish to, at this point, we're still formulating the survey, but to find out what is important in our school community. And I would love, I've talked to a few of the other PTA people in the other schools, and they also are interested in seeing how that goes for us, and also getting our survey to see if that works with their needs at their schools, and also sending something out. And something in the way of a Survey Monkey, seeing the percentage we get back of participation, whether that's adequate or not, or if we need to put a survey out in a different way. And I'm talking a 1 or 2 question survey, very simple, straightforward, about what do you want to see in the Haley Elementary community. So that's the big thing I took from that. And then to bring that back to those meetings and to the board so that you know here's what our schools want to focus on, want you to focus on.
Penny, are you on the PTA?
I am. I'm at the high school PTA.
Okay.
We've talked about it as well, and I think one of the things that came out of our conversation was that we're thinking about doing a similar kind of a survey. Could be a paper thing, could be electronic, could be a mixture, but more specifically targeted towards what policies people feel are important to review at this time. We were taking that information about, that's what the board is mostly TSA members being able to present that at a board meeting or supply it to all the board members so you all see what our thinking is. That's so cool.
There's one. Chris, are you on the PTA? Are you leading it?
And I are on that board together.
Who is?
We're
Oh, okay. Sorry.
both on the high school.
I forget that your kids have moved on.
All right, I think it would be crucial for us as a board to create some kind of guiding questions, guiding principles that we are looking for from information from our PTAs to be able to open that dialogue, to make it beneficial and useful to us as a board. As was mentioned, our area of focus and our roles and responsibilities, board members, are the budget, policy, and the superintendent. And outside of that, no offense, but you get to enjoy the pleasures of dealing with the day-to-day operations of the district. So how we as board members can structure the information from the PTAs or PTSAs so that we can focus on those areas, as well as an interesting comment about how that information would then be disseminated to the board. Would it be through a single point person or via email or a report or participation at a meeting? And so I'd like to go ahead and get others' thoughts on those aspects.
Can we hold that thought for one quick sec? There's one other person, Tiffany, and I didn't see you out there.
No, that's okay. Agreed and ditto. And
Okay.
Sean just kind of summed it up. I think we were talking about something that might be relevant at the high school, might not be relevant to a parent at Bellevue Elementary. So if you look at those policies that the board directly oversees, then it makes sense to put those guiding questions out to our families.
Thank you.
Further comments from the board?
I think that it sounds like there's a wide agreement with what's going on here, and I like the idea of taking as wide cross section as possible. Also, the three things: the policy, the superintendent, and the budget. Weighing in on any of those three things is really important. Helps us as board members to do our job. So, however, I think there's a wide degree of latitude there. I don't think any of us on the board want to control this process at all. As a matter of fact, the opposite. So
Feedback is important, so that would be great.
Yeah, in terms of the guiding conversations, the specific ask, that can easily morph, I think, and this is the issue that I have with that. That can easily morph into guiding the discussion in one way or another, according to what happens to be on the important at the time to the board, which may or may not be what's important to the PTAs. So I see 4 people out here right now who are very involved in the PTAs, and I trust that they've heard this, and I think to say, here's the 3 areas that the board can influence, so here's your chance for direct input. We'd love to hear it, is as far as we should go.
All right. If there's no further comments on the school advisory committees, we'll go ahead and move forward with the Finance Committee recommendation regarding business manager treasurer position. And I was in attendance at that meeting, but as a liaison, would you like to report back on what occurred?
I'm sorry, can we go back one step? I'm not sure what the next steps are on the, I didn't quite get the end of that conversation about, are we as a board going to send, which I think that we're kind of going in the direction that we all want to be proactive and talking about a very 3 specific areas: policy, superintendent, budget, please provide your input on these areas in whatever way you want to, with the most broad
Yeah.
cross-section. Is that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that, having the PTA, having this committee would help them provide feedback to us, and if it's a more broad spectrum, I think that, like an annual thing too, because every year you're going to have parents who have different feedback, some are just entering in, seeing things for a first time and making something annual, or maybe even semi-annual.
We're talking about monthly even.
Monthly?
Yeah,
Okay.
just, yeah. And possibly, I don't know, if the PTAs are, if they don't have a monthly input, just say that, there's some times where you get involved with the science night or something like that, and you need to skip it.
So I'm kind of curious about, so would this be at the board meeting that we get this input? This would be monthly at the board meeting? If they choose
What it
to. It
seems
wouldn't be
like.
something that they had to do on a monthly basis. It would be available to them.
Yeah.
I think a monthly might be too much, just speaking as a parent myself, trying to provide.
Haley, we had talked about, I think, every other month would be more than enough
Mm-hmm.
to report back to, unless there was something
Okay.
abnormal.
But that the opportunity is available
Yeah.
if it were desired.
But
They
I
would
think
have.
structured
Yeah.
meeting every other month would be more than enough, in my opinion. I don't know how the rest of the
If I
Dr.
could
Holmes.
make a recommendation maybe on how to move forward, since this seems kind of organic and loose, maybe have a draft, and I'm not volunteering myself, of how you want this to work, the procedures of this, and then bring it back to the table for approval instead of it's just kind of all over the place and we're not quite sure what we're agreeing to.
So that's fine. I don't know, I'm already working on the draft of the finance committee. If anyone else wants to take that, that would be great, but I will also take it if you don't.
To draft.
To draft a letter that,
You could be a policy or it could just be your procedures of how you want to do this.
I would
So
see it more
somebody
as a
can agree
procedure
on
rather than an actual policy.
So you know what you're agreeing on.
I would be happy to sit with somebody. I just don't feel qualified right now to write the procedures for something like that.
You want to do it at our one-on-one?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that.
Okay.
I just
That
worked
would make it
myself back
okay
into it.
if another board member were to work with you. That would be in violation of open meeting also.
Oh.
If you want to do it with the superintendent,
That's
I
okay.
think that would be
or
just
you
fine.
can post it, because sometimes I know that last year it was, we weren't quite aware of that, and there was a lot of work that had to be done in between meetings, and people got together to try to just do what needed to be done. And
Right,
groups of two, we
right.
didn't know. So
And it helps to have somebody to work with on it. I just don't feel qualified to sit and do it.
I just would like to make
You are.
I
one
am.
more comment. There's
After
nothing
3 meetings.
preventing any PTA ever from speaking out. Of course, you're speaking out as an individual until the policy is made or the procedure is made, but I think that we all on the board welcome that.
Yeah, I think as noted by our public comment or our email address is always posted on the web, and any parent, community member, staff member is always welcome to get in contact with us as a board, and we welcome that input. So, all right. Well, I appreciate you, Trustee Freund, being willing to tackle that with Dr. Holmes, and look forward to seeing the draft procedure. So, okay, now we'll move on to the Finance Committee recommendations regarding the business manager and treasurer position. And as I mentioned, I was in attendance at that meeting, but as the board member sitting on that committee, would you like to report back on that, Trustee Corker?
Sure. There was a vote on that committee that was 6 in favor of not splitting the position, and I was the only one in favor of splitting the position. So that was how that went. Since then, we've heard some comments tonight. I would also like to see that committee be, and I think that we've just decided, be a true citizen committee. We may or may not get a different outcome, but we know it will be independent. So,
All right, I appreciate that report back. And if I remember correctly from that meeting also, there was one abstention from the chairman of that committee, Mr. Gary Beck, as well.
And this is in the middle
Mike-
of the meeting. I
oh,
didn't
Mike
get a
Beck,
chance.
excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
I apologize.
I didn't get a chance to thank Mr. Wilson for his presentation. It kind of came and went, but I found it very inspiring. So thank you.
All right, are there any further comments on the Finance Committee recommendation?
I have a question. I mean, so are we, as a board, going with the recommendation to not split, or is this something where we're going to vote on this to have a final say in?
Sounds to me like we've decided to make the committee community members, only community members, with a chairman from the community, and then have a revote and let them do it independently of staff and board members.
Okay.
Is that right?
I'm not understanding that personally.
Oh.
My understanding was for the Finance Committee to, policy to be reworked, and the Finance Committee remorphing. I was not under the impression or the understanding that that was going to be sent back to the Finance Committee by the board. It was my understanding in the July meeting when we appointed Mr. Chatterton as the treasurer business manager that we did so contingent upon a recommendation from the Finance Committee. We have that recommendation from the Finance Committee, and they are recommending at this time to keep it together. I do not see a reason personally to send it back to the Finance Committee.
Trustee Bustos, is that Bustos? Is that how you pronounce it? Thank you. Brings up a good point, though, and I think that the committee recommendation is just that. It's a recommendation. And so I think that we're hearing things that we did not hear before. I would like, and we've got a new board member, and I would like to see where the board stands on this issue. So I would like to make a recommendation or proposal that we put it up for a vote at the next meeting, at the next board meeting in November.
A vote on how?
A vote on whether whether the board needs an independent treasurer from the
Yes.
business manager position.
Other comments from the board?
I would be in agreement with voting on that again, just because I feel like we're in limbo and it needs to be addressed, and I just think we need to bring that up for vote, so I would agree with that.
Okay. Well, as per the way things get added to the agenda, we've had multiple board members request that, so that will be on the November agenda. All right. We'll go ahead and move forward with the new business section of the agenda and turn the time over to Dr. Holmes to introduce our next ISAT 2 report, or
Okay.
2.0.
We do have a report tonight on ISAT 2.0. I want to stress as emphatically as I can, this is a preliminary report. The state has still not released official data, so we are guessing on which students are part of this count and which ones are not. We think we're pretty good guessers at this, but I still want to stress that this is preliminary. Because we don't want to just keep waiting on that results from the state and you guys not have anything before something's released. So here we go. I'm going to ask Marcia Graybo to come up. She's our data and assessment coordinator to talk to us about this. I want to first of all, though, give a little context that the ISAT assessment is one of multiple measures that we use, especially under our new strategic plan that requires many different types of measures, some of them formal tests and some of them not. It helps us measure how we are doing under that goal of every child being educated. The Department of Education at the U.S. level requires that grades 3 through 8 be assessed in English, language, arts, and math, and once in high school. Our state of Idaho has some more requirements on top of that, but that's what the is required by the Elementary and Secondary Ed Act currently. And it is a new assessment. The students saw it for the first time last year. This is the first year we get any student results on it. And it is all just a part of the process of when you create a new test, all the field testing that has to happen, all the data that has to be collected in order to ensure that the assessment has some validity and reliability to it. It is very different from our former state assessment in that it measures higher order thinking skills. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Grabo.
And I would also like to thank Greg Wilson for his presentation because it's the perfect lead-in to what education is today, and therefore why we needed a new assessment. As Dr. Holmes mentioned, it's the first year that we've had results. It is a brand new test based on our new Idaho core standards. These standards were adopted in January of 2011, which isn't really that long ago. And the intention was that those standards would be taught for the first time in 2013-14, and then assessed for the first time in 2014-15, and that's been the process. So assessing higher order thinking skills, it's not what I had in high school. And I wanted to just give you a little bit of exposure to what the old test, or old ISAT, looks like compared to the new test. So on the school website, www.blaineschools.org, on our homepage, at the time that we sent out the score reports last summer, we added a link to ISAT 2.0 so that parents could get additional information. That takes you to the assessment website. I just want to point out our belief statement. We have a data and assessment committee, and our belief is that thoughtful assessment is fundamental to the process of learning. And on this web page, there's particularly resources about the spring 2015 test, because that was the major set of score reports that were sent out this summer, the new ones. So I just want to, if you can know that you can read it, but an example here involves a story called Grandma Ruth. So it starts out, last night I learned that my grandma was named after Babe Ruth, the greatest baseball player of all time. I learned this 6 hours too late. So that's a pretty good lead-in. Not the kind of story I got on my high school assessments or elementary assessments. And it goes on in that passage. On the old ISAT, a question that might have been asked was, well, why did Naomi need a new baseball? It would have been multiple choice with one right answer. On the new test, as we'll see, the first question is, what does Naomi learn about Grandma Ruth? Use details from the text to support your answer, and type your answer in the space below. So from the report that you have in front of you or from the web page, you can go to that question on the sample questions. Here's our Grandma Ruth story on the left, and this is in general the format on our English language arts and literacy assessments. So it's a fairly long story, and there'll be 3 questions all related to this story. So here's the first one. At the top of each sample item, there's something that says about this item. It tells us the name. This is Grandma Ruth 1. We'll see Grandma Ruth 2 and 3. And this is a grade 4 question. So there are 4 claims within English language arts: reading, writing, listening and speaking. We only assess listening on this assessment, and research. So this particular question involves claim 1, reading, and a particular target. Can a student identify or summarize the central idea? There are specific standards from the Idaho Core Standards that are being addressed by that target. Because the students actually type in their answers, this particular question is graded by a human being. It's one of the reasons that there were delays in getting our test scores this year. And it's based on a holistic rubric. Using rubrics effectively is an art as well as a science. You have to calibrate. So all the people that were hired went through an extensive calibration process, and every item was seen, I think, by 2 assessors. These same skills are getting used by teachers in the classroom. I didn't see the rubric that Greg Wilson had, but I'm sure they had a rubric for assessing the final summative assessment. And if we go on to the next question involving Grandma Ruth, it's the same passage, and this time the students read a particular set of sentences from the passage, and they're asked to click on 2 phrases that help you understand the meaning of the word scarred. So as we come along, my grandma pulled the ball out. Does that help us? No. So we go on, unwrapped it, held it out for us to see. The ball was scarred. That doesn't help us. Almost beyond recognition. It had dog bites. What do you think about dog bites? Should we go for that one? Dirt scuffs, fraying seams, and it was smudged. So there are clearly many specific things in this item that might relate to that. If we go to about this item, it's still claim 1, reading, but now it involves target 3, which is word meanings. And the rubric for this one makes it completely, this was computer graded, not people graded. And you can see the kinds of responses that would lead to a score of 0, 1, or 2. Close. That makes them a bit confused. And there is a third question that involves finding sentences that show that she's done something wrong. So in this case, again, it's still the reading claim, but now it's about using key ideas, key details that you just click on. And again, that has the rubric. So that's an example of one reading passage that had 3 questions to it that a student might have gotten on the assessment. So we turn to mathematics, my own field of teaching. I taught for 9 years at Wood River High School. And this is an old style, old ISAT question, what's 5/8 plus 1/8, versus a new kind of question which is in context. So I will just admit, I taught 10th grade students that struggled with math, and it was important that they pass this assessment. It was required for graduation, the old ISAT, just like the new ISAT. And we would take 3 weeks just before the assessment, and I knew exactly what kinds of questions were on it. I knew how they would be phrased, and we worked those questions in a very narrow way. The students tended to do well on the assessment. It did not lead to long-term retention or much inspiration or engagement, but they passed the test. And that test, you could do that with. You could teach to the test. Let's take a look at the new test. It doesn't work quite that way anymore. So here's some sample questions. I'm just going to show you 2 of them. Here we have 5 swimmers competing in a 50-meter race. This definitely does not look like my high school assessments. And we're shown the finish time for each of the 5 swimmers. And then we're asked to explain how the results of the race would change if the race used a clock that rounded to the nearest tenth. Students have to understand place value. They have to understand rounding. But they're actually being assessed on their ability to apply that and explain what would happen in a real situation. So when we look at about this item, this is a grade 5 problem. It's to help, it's claim 3, communicating reasoning. So that's its own special claim, and we'll talk about the claims at the very end. And again, there's a rubric because this would be graded by a human being. If we go to the next question, it probably looks a little more like something you might have seen on an older style assessment. We have a number line that goes from 0 to 1. Here's point P. And for each of these 5 parts, we're asked to address whether the point that's indicated is equivalent to point P. Okay. So if we look at about this item, this is a grade 3 problem in fractions. And this time it's claim 1, concepts and procedures, the stuff that we think we understand what it looks like, but it's still a more interesting problem than our old style tests. And when we look at the note here, they want to make sure that students understand that fractions are numbers that fall between 0 and 1. They're not just parts of a pie or parts of a pizza. So I'm trying to see, is this my thing? Okay, that's fine, thank you. So we've looked at a sample English language arts problem, set of problems, a couple of mathematics problems. So now let's talk about the actual assessment results and what we've been able to do with them. So just one thing, it's the first year of this assessment, so we can't look at growth data. How much growth did a particular student or a particular group of students do between last year and this year, because we don't have the results from last year. Next year it'll be an even richer report as we're able to look at that growth data. But for now, there are a number of questions that we have addressed. One question that we were all curious about before we got the assessments is, at the state level, how well are students doing? There were predictions based on how Idaho students have done on the NAEP assessment. They didn't look good. We were concerned about what the results would look like. And I will talk about that at the end, about how well I'll tell you the answer. The Idaho results looked better than we expected, which means at some level that the changes that needed to be happening in the classroom have been happening at a state level. We want to know how our Blaine County students are doing compared with state results. And that gets to the point that Dr. Holmes made. The only state results I have are from something called the online reporting system. It includes every student that took the test, including students that started 2 weeks before the test, that maybe had a break in practice, or are brand new English language learners. And those scores won't be part of the official state results, and they won't be part of our official results. And that's in Appendix A of your report. But we just included everybody. And then the third question is, well, how is this affecting what's happening in the classroom now? So let's first look at our English language arts and literacy. Again, so it's both fiction and nonfiction, just as in Greg Wilson's project, students were reading both fiction and nonfiction and making those connections. So we have a beautiful chart here, figure 3, that shows proficiency rate on a scale from 0 to 100 on the vertical axis, and shows grades 3 through 10. The blue is the state of Idaho, and the orange is Blaine County School District. At 3rd grade, the results are fairly close together, and it's about half of the students that were proficient. In general, proficiency rates went up with grade level, and about 2/3 of Blaine County students are proficient at 10th grade. And that's significantly higher than we were expecting based on NAEP results.
Do you want to explain what NAEP is?
It is a national test.
Assessment of educational progress.
Assessment of educational progress that is given it's given in some sense randomly in school districts. Our school district tends to participate at grades 4 and 8 every 2 years. And they pick a random group of students, and you have to give that group of students that they pick the test. We don't see results at an individual school level, but at a U.S. level, we're able to look at state results and understand how Idaho's doing. And I think that's part of the impetus for Common Core standards in the first place. Idaho was seeing 90% proficiency on the old ISAT, and nowhere near that strong in terms of our performance on the NAEP exam. So it's fine to understand the overall trend for all students, but in terms of accountability for the federal government, as well as our own understanding of accountability, we really want to look at possible at-risk subgroups. And I'm actually just going to say, I'm going to show you ethnicity because it's usually the first one we look at. And although there's definitely a gap between the performance of white and Hispanic students, this is just one cut. We're not looking at whether they're also economically disadvantaged, whether they're English language learners or not. And I'm not going to show you with this data, but ethnicity is not a risk factor. It's the other things, English language learners, special ed students, economically disadvantaged are really our risk factors. But still, we're going to be assessed for ethnicity, so let's take a look at that. So let's look at third grade. This is for the whole district. 32% of our Hispanic students were proficient as compared with 27% of Idaho Hispanic students. Among white students, 63% of Blaine County students and 54% of white Idaho students were proficient. So in both cases, the Blaine County results were higher than the state results. The other metric that gets looked at is how big is the gap between those two parts of the subgroup. So when we look at this Blaine County number of 31%, it's that the white students were 63%, the Hispanic students were 32% proficient. That difference is 31%, so that's the size of the gap in the district. At the state level, it's 54% minus 27%, a 27% gap. So that's why this is highlighted yellow. Our gap is bigger than the state gap. We want high achievement, but we also want small gaps. So, and pretty much for all of our subgroups, and I'm going to turn to Appendix B at the end, all of the different subgroups are on one page for English language arts. At the top was the data that the chart is made from of our overall. Here's the ethnicity data that we just looked at. And then we also have data here broken out by students who are students with disabilities. So those are students that are being served by our special ed services. Our English language learners. There's a problem on the online reporting system. When we actually get our real numbers for English language learners, they will not include our students who've been really completely exited from the program, but these results include those students. And again, the only way I can compare with the state is to do the same thing that the state did. And then finally, economically disadvantaged. The state has not released those numbers as part of the online reporting system. So in general, going back to the main flow of the document, students in Blaine County are at a higher proficiency rate than in Idaho. The two exceptions were highlighted in yellow. And in general, our gap is bigger. And again, all of those are highlighted in yellow. So I'm going to take a pause here. Any questions at this point? If I used words that are not...
I'm curious if you have any ideas why our gap is bigger, even though our proficiency is higher. Do you have any hypothesis on that?
I don't have an answer to that. It's certainly something we're grappling with and are discussing among the leadership team. And in general, I've gone back to look at a little bit of the data. This is just my second year in the job as data assessment coordinator, so I haven't been involved in the analysis in the past. But it does appear that it's been an issue for us for a while.
If I could add to that,
yeah.
that as Ms. Grabo said earlier, ethnicity is not a risk factor. However, poverty, special education or disability and learning English as your second language are all disabilities. We do know that in our particular school district, in our Hispanic community, about 70% of the students, I'm looking at Mr. Chatterton to make sure I'm
That
in the
is
right
correct.
ballpark,
Yeah.
qualify for free and reduced lunches, which is the measure of poverty used in this kind of reporting. And in the white community, only about 20% of the students. So that ethnicity is probably a mask for the real problem of poverty.
But wouldn't that be true across districts in Idaho? I mean, why would that be just different?
It might or might not, and
Might
we
not.
don't know. Yeah.
But the reason our gap is bigger is, if that's what is, our achievement in both groups is higher.
higher.
Right.
And our white achievement is so
Significantly
extremely
higher.
higher than the rest of the state that it causes that gap to be bigger.
And that could easily be due to some of
But
the
we
other-
want our Hispanic achievement to be extremely higher than the rest of the
Right,
state, too.
Yeah, just a quick question. I'm just trying to get my mind around how they peel off, or how you can be certain, and I'm not questioning it whatsoever, when you're talking about the different ELL and economically disadvantaged and Hispanic. It seems like there's a lot of overlap. So how do you peel off what is affecting things and what is not?
I did a statistical analysis to see which were the actual real relevant factors. It's not something that, I don't have results for the state, so I can't do it at a state level. I would love to do that. But I can do it because I have all the scores.
And because you're a math teacher, smart.
That's right.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there, have you seen if there's any programs in other communities for Hispanic students that help increase those scores? Or is that something that might be investigated to see if there are programs that help Hispanic students succeed better?
Well, I can speak to some of the things that we have started in the last year to close the gap, because this is not new. Last year we had a lot of conversations at district leadership about elementary reading. Our elementary reading, by several measures, is not as robust as we want it to be. And so we are continuing that conversation this year with each of the elementary schools, having the clear understanding that they must improve outcomes in elementary reading. And so each school has been given the freedom to figure out how they're going to do this. And I'll just tell you from my observation, it is not for a lack of teacher ability. It is comes more to the fact that if I'm the teacher in the classroom and I'm teaching reading, I have this group in front of me for maybe 10 to 15 minutes, and then they switch, and the next group comes to me and they switch. And so there might be an hour of reading instruction, but I might, as a child, as a student, be spending 10 to 15 minutes in really intense reading instruction, and the rest of the time I'm out here doing something else to keep myself occupied while it's not my time with the teacher. So we've got schools looking at how do we maximize that time, so that whole hour for me as a student is spent around reading and writing, not doing busy work type of stuff to keep busy. So that's one of the things that's going on. A second thing that is going on is, and I think I sent you that data, we had a huge push last year at the high school level to recruit students for advanced opportunities that had not participated in advanced opportunities before, many of those out of our Hispanic subgroup. So now the challenge on the high school this year is to help those students be successful in advanced opportunities. So it's helping students, building the scaffolding so students can be successful at a higher level, not lowering the bar. So that's a new thing that is happening this year, is getting many more students in those opportunities. Another thing that began last year was the introduction of the WIDA standards, which are national standards for teaching students that are learning English. And we began training teachers on that, because all of us are teachers of language. Oftentimes there was the perception that if they were the English language development teacher, it was their job to teach the child to speak English, where no, we all are involved in speaking English. I speak English, kind of, but I don't speak the English of astrophysics. So if I was in an astrophysics class, the teacher would have to help me learn the language of astrophysics. even though I'm already an English speaker. So we've begun that work. We had more teachers trained on October 1st and 2nd. So all teachers are learning the importance of teaching language, regardless of their content area. And we've got some of our teachers now co-teaching with our English language development teachers. So there's a teacher in the classroom for just a part of the day who is the English language development teacher, and a teacher in the classroom who's the content teacher, so they can reinforce that with each other. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention that was begun just in the last year, and this is not the end-all be-all list, I just want you to know we've made some strides in making this happen, was in the budget that you just approved last June, were some reading and math interventions for kids who are getting interventions in addition to what's happening in the classroom. We had Read 180 at the middle school, and that was about it. Everything else was kind of whatever teachers could scrape up. So now we have formal adoptions in both math at the elementary and the middle, and some elementary supports in reading as well. So teachers aren't digging around in the back closet trying to figure out what they can find to make this happen. So we have begun some work in this area. We are not done, but we have begun some work in this area. It is. Oh, and I should say one other thing. Because of that focus last year on helping all of us become teachers of language, we set a goal as a district last year to increase the number of students who moved from a level 3, because if you're an English language learner, we give you an assessment that gives you a level, and our level 1s and 2s were moving pretty easily to the next level. Our level 3s and 4s were getting stuck. They weren't moving forward as rapidly, so we set a goal to increase that, and we actually met that goal last year in increasing the number of kids. So we're still working on that. The unfortunate piece is the assessment for that has changed, so we can't compare their level from last year to their level this year, but we're still very conscious of knowing those kids by name. So if I'm the classroom teacher and Marcia is an English language level learner level 3, I know that, and I am addressing her needs in the classroom because I know that. It's not a hidden fact over here in the database system type of thing. So.
Yeah, and I will say, having been a teacher just a few years back, there's just a lot more intentionality through this process and much more focus. And I think you can also see with both the math and the English how important the language part is.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
So when we did the strategic planning process, when the district did the strategic planning process a few years back, the big things that came back from the community were that they wanted better curriculum, they wanted IB Avid, and the third thing was foreign language. Of course, there's a lot of overlap in those because foreign language is included in IB. Mm-hmm. But the Avid piece seems to me, or it looks like, the other schools that have done it, for example, Boise School District, it transformed their Hispanic results. And it was also, it's done that in California, it's done it everywhere that it's been implemented. It's a program for students that are aspiring to take advanced classes, particularly Hispanic students. It offers tutoring, one-on-one tutoring. It offers note-taking. It offers things like trips to colleges. It seems to be, I think that what I heard was the teachers can't handle another program, and I completely understand that. What I didn't understand about it is how it couldn't be implemented in a way that would actually make teachers' jobs easier, so that you'd have that as a standalone program, and that would actually make the kids in the classroom come more prepared on an even playing field into that classroom, and therefore make it easier on the teachers. So you're not saying this is another thing you have to do. You have an Avid coordinator. I'm wondering what. It seems like all the things that we're doing are wonderful, but it might be somewhat of a patchwork. I'm wondering why we didn't ever go the Avid route. I'm curious.
Well, I can tell you from the previous district where I worked that was using both IB and Avid, it got into a battle of wills between AVID and IB at the national level, because you have to be certified to be an IB school. You also have to be certified to be an IB school, an AVID school. They both have different frameworks and different schedules. And so actually the district dropped IB because they couldn't do both at the same time and meet the national requirements. You are correct that AVID has some fabulous research behind it on how it supports not Hispanic students, but any student from poverty that is a first generation taking advanced opportunities or taking college level courses. We do have a teacher this year at the high school who is specifically offering that kind of support to kids. We're calling it a grit class type of thing, which does a lot of the same and doesn't get us into a battle between those two national frameworks on which one we're going to live with type of thing. So that's where we are with that right now. It's certainly something that could be looked into more, but they both are national programs, they both have national dues, they both require national training, and they both have their own set of schedules and frameworks that they expect to be implemented, which do not align.
One last thing. So I know that the district, this was a few years back, sent a team at quite an expense to Denver to go to the orientation, and the team was teachers, and it was, I think, primarily high school teachers. Julia Graff might have been on it. I can't remember. At any rate, they came back and they said that they thought it was excellent. They highly recommended it. So there was a little bit of that buy-in. So we had heard about that. We meaning PTA. It started out. The colonel started out with the PTAs. Had heard about that and did a report on what curriculums could be used, and especially in the challenges that we have here with high diversity. Would IB work if you didn't have a program like this? And we did over 50 hours of one-on-one interviews with schools all over our area who had AVID and who also had high diversity. Some of them had high diversity. For instance, Commerce City, that school district has 100% free and reduced lunch, because once you go over 80%, everybody's free and reduced lunch, because they don't want to discriminate against kids who, or not discriminate against, but identify kids who are of better means, and then it becomes a little bit problematic. So I hear you. I would love to be able to look at a broad cross-section. I think Alexandria, that's a great example of your firsthand knowledge of that situation. I would love to look at some other examples as well, if possible, because that may be the pervasive example, but we saw some examples where they said we couldn't imagine having IB without AVID. So I think there's a little bit, maybe the longer they had it, the less they'd feel like that, but I'd love to hear that.
Well, one thing I can say is I think we all feel very, very strongly that by following the data and looking at the data, we can monitor what is effective, and I think that's an important thing. Just a quick aside, I got into teaching because I randomly bought a book called Radical Equations, Math Literacy and Civil Rights.
That's excellent.
Yeah, but we're all in this together, and that feels really good. So thank you. So I'm going to go much more quickly through the math results. You have them. If you want to spend any more time looking at any of this data, it's clear that I love talking about data. I would be happy to come to where you are and talk with you. Or you can come to my office. I'm over in the tech building.
So I have one question.
Sure.
With this new data you have now in the new testing protocol,
Yeah.
the deltas exist that you have shown here in gap ethnicity.
Yeah.
Gap for ethnicity. Those deltas are really not correlatable to previous gaps, because the proficiency levels you said previously were 90 percentile, and now we had percentile of 60% as far as high-level proficiency.
60% was good, yeah.
So that's 30% differential.
Right.
But is there any correlation year over so that we can see if things are working effectively with this transition in that gap? I mean, what was the gap at the 90th percentile of proficiency as a school district?
I did look at some of those gaps. Let me pull it together and I can send it to you.
You know what I'm asking, though,
I
right?
do know what
Because
you're
there is
asking.
even, it is
This-
English and math,
yeah.
and there was a
The
gap.
last results we had were from 2012-13. Those results actually are on the state website.
Okay.
And those gaps. The accountability was done a little bit differently at that point. So I don't have anything that I can compare directly with
It would
this.
be interesting to see
But I
that.
can look kind of overall. Part of the issue here is that because the proficiency rate changes with grade level so much, it makes it harder when we look at a whole school to know what our new numbers are going to mean when we look at our whole school numbers. The whole school numbers before made sense because it was pretty much 90% across the board kind of thing.
Because we've implemented intervention,
Right.
obviously, on a previous set of data.
Yep.
Now we're trying to put that apple into this orange.
Yeah,
And it's like, how do we know what's
And
working?
it's such a different test.
How do we know
I
it's
think
working?
at some level we have to start from here and go forward.
And wait a year till the
Well,
results come out.
pretty much. I mean, there are interim assessments available. There's a lot of things that we're doing in the school system. We're not going to just wait till next year and take the test again. But there are a number of things along the way that are going to help inform instruction. So partly looking at the results from last year as to where to look, and then using some of these new resources to actually use them in the classroom this year. So because these are common standards, the resources that are available are amazing compared to what I had as an Idaho teacher 3 years ago. So there are some really tremendous resources to help us with that. So with the math results, at third grade, again, this is proficiency rate versus grade level. Third grade, we're about 50% of students are proficient, and it plummets to about a third of students being proficient at 10th grade. Not a pretty sight for a former math teacher.
And offhandedly, how are those proficiencies related to last year's testing? Say English was 90, this year was 60 top end. We're at 20 and change? And
Yeah, at some
Is
level, I
there-
don't even really want to answer that question.
I'm
because
just curious
it's such
the
different-
disparity between the previous system and the current system, because there's a gross disparity, right, in assessment results. I'm trying to get.
Yes.
I'm
and
trying to
that-
grasp
right,
that.
and the issue, how do I put this? It was, I mean, you've seen it was such a different test. I could teach in the short term to that test
Mhm.
and make kids
I got that
successful.
part. I got that.
But they weren't really being successful.
Mhm.
So although these proficiency results look worse, I know the kind of retention that we're seeing because kids are doing something richer. And I hate to say
Yeah,
this, but it's like,
I got that
some
part.
of you just have to wait till next year, and then we're going to look and
Okay.
see. I wish I had a better answer than that.
The scary thing for me is these math results are higher than what the state predicted.
They are. These are
So
still
that's
higher than what
really
the state
scary.
predicted.
It's not a very high level of proficiency.
No,
It
no.
is not a very high level of proficiency.
That doesn't even get a letter grade.
So,
At the same time, it shows that the test is rigorous.
Yeah, very different,
It is.
very rigorous.
very
And we're
rigorous.
on the right course.
And-
This is what it says to me. that
We're
this is-
seeing
Even though the
one
scores
answer
are
out of
low,
four,
we
right.
are
Right.
measuring
It's worth up in the
better
the other
measure,
piece I will
yeah.
say, From what I remember hearing, when the state first adopted the old ISAT test, it took several years before proficiency rates were,
Until teachers figured out how to teach that test.
That was teaching to the
well,
test.
at some level,
Yeah.
and students got used to it. The interesting thing now is these are really college and career-ready standards. There are 6 states that have said students that reach proficiency on this test don't have to take college placement tests. They are college and career ready. They will not have to do remedial work. So these standards started from what we were looking for, and they worked backwards to what the progression needed to be. And I just really want to make a point. It's a coherent progression. And that took a large number of educators all across the country to be able to do that.
I'm curious how the students reacted when they've been taking those other tests for so long, and this was before them.
Mixed. In general, students were actually pretty engaged. They really put time into it. You read every time I've done a practice test, I've learned something. I get to read something new, think critically about it. It's intrinsically more
And they can't
engaging.
Christmas tree the answers.
There's
They
no
have to
Christmas
actually...
tree.
You can't have a cadabra.
You really can't. Okay. So, in general, when we look at all the subgroups, the Blaine County scores are pretty consistently higher than the Idaho scores. And again, the exceptions are highlighted in yellow, and in general, our gaps are bigger, and that was Appendix C. There's another cut, and these results are not available directly from the online reporting system, but because we have all the scores, I did want to include the school-specific scores. So if you turn, I think, Amanda, did you print those for them so they actually have I'm not sure. Okay. So, and I do apologize for that. These are clicks, but you can go online to my website, to the assessment website, or click on them on your computer. But these are now, so here's our schools. Cary shows up in 3 places. It's a grade 3-5 school, a grade 6-8, and a grade 9-10. Ultimately, for accountability purposes, it'll be looked at as one school. But for us to be able to compare how students are doing at different schools, I've broken Cary out. So if we look here, here's Alturas, 196 students, 48% of whom are proficient. That puts them, pretty much right in line with the other schools. When we do start looking at subgroups, we're able to get additional information. So here's Alturas. Alturas is the one school that has a higher Hispanic population. So 143 students, over 50%, are Hispanic. 52 students are white or non-Hispanic. And when we look at that kind of a breakout, among the white students at Alturas, 87% were proficient. Okay, this is not causal. We're not going into that. But it's an extremely high proficiency rate. And sometimes when we look at overall numbers, it's hard to get into some of the details that we need as educators about how we're doing. So anyway, there's results there for each of the subgroups for both math and for language arts. So just getting back to the questions that we asked in the first place, overall, English language arts scores tend to go up with grade level. For math, they tend to go down with grade level. I do have some preliminary results that, again, include all students from Washington, Oregon, and California. The students in California, the trends are identical in all 4 states. Washington was the only state that had a little bit higher overall achievement proficiency rates. In terms of Blaine County students, with only a few exceptions, our students are achieving at a higher proficiency rate than Idaho students, and in general, our gaps are bigger. And I just want to get back briefly to the claim level and even the target level. I mentioned that there's 4 claims for the English language arts. And the interesting thing is that for both Blaine County School District and Idaho, the trends were the same. Students were weakest at reading and strongest at research. So that helps us as educators decide where to put focus. In mathematics, we saw that that first math problem with the swimmers was about communicating reasoning. Students in Idaho did pretty well in communicating reasoning. I'm going to be really curious to see how students in other states do. We've had the Mathematical Thinking Initiative for many years now, since before 2011. And that's made a real difference, I think, in our students' abilities to be working with that. So going forward, as Dr. Holmes mentioned at the beginning, this is one measure among many, and they are new tests. We're still getting used to exactly what they mean and how to use them. Our new strategic plan is about inspiring, engaging, educating, and empowering students. And this assessment isn't certainly the richest possible thing. I'd much rather be involved in Greg Wilson's unit. And it is driving all teachers to really help prepare students for a test that does a much better job with critical thinking. We can also look at a classroom level at how students are doing at the target level. So that specific target, how are they doing with key details, with getting main ideas? So there's a tremendous amount of information just based on the 1 year of results.
All right. Thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
We'll go ahead and continue on now with the item B, Blaine County School District Policy 203.1, Formulation, Revision, and Adoption of Policy discussion. And Trustee Schwartle, this was something that you
Yes.
requested be on the agenda.
And unfortunately, I did not get to this. So I just made the comment about, I think the only thing that this applies to is the financial committee policy. So I'm sorry about that. It was one of those things that I couldn't get to. But I think that in any case, the board always has the purview to be able to pass policy without it going to the policy committee, but I think it should be stated as well. And I would also, well, I'll wait until the end of the meeting because there was something about the policy for the financial committee policy that I wanted to get to the end of. I didn't feel like that we got to any action on that. So, or we got it to an action till November, but if I could bring that up later as well at the end, I'm going to do that.
Any further discussion on the current policy 203.1? I'm comfortable with the policy as it stands. I personally feel it's a very wise idea for us as a board to have those that are going to be implementing the policy review it and bring back their recommendations to us. That being said, as was mentioned, those are recommendations and it is the ultimate decision of the board. But I still think it's important to have those staff members to be able to take a look at it, staff and community members, to take a look at it, see what possible implications it might cause that the board did not foresee at the time. So I'm personally comfortable with the policy remaining as it stands.
It seems like in most cases that's right because most of the policies are, or a lot of the policies are administrative, but there are policies that have to do with strictly policy and more 30,000-foot view, and I think that that's where this goes awry. And I think ISBA, when we had the communication workshop, was also questioning that we were diverting all policy to a policy committee and then waiting for it to come back.
Any further comments? All right. We'll go ahead and move forward with the agenda on the 2016 ISBA proposed resolutions. And this is both resolutions and a bylaw change, which Dr. Holmes and I went and attended the ISBA region meeting down in Buell back on the 1st of October. And these are going to be things that are voted on in the business session. The way it works is each district, depending on how large it is, gets an X amount of votes, and those votes can be voted lump sum or broken up, and how the general population of the contingency at ISBA votes, that sets the legislative platform for ISBA for the next 2 years. So anything that passes this year would be on the ISBA's legislative platform for 2 years. Trustee Freund and I will be attending that ISBA conference up in Coeur d'Alene, and is the board comfortable with trustee Freund and I voting our conscience at that meeting?
Completely.
No.
I would
Do we
like
want
to...
to discuss any of these before? Because they're interesting.
They
I
are.
mean, they're all standalone. I don't really want to get into it tonight.
Yeah.
Is there a way we can?
One of the ones
Because there's a
that-
lot of stuff here. I've read through them all, and it's like,
Yeah. One of the ones that would really affect us is the number 9, the administrators in districts with remote schools. We happen to be one of those districts who would benefit from that, and that's basically requesting the state to fund an extra half-time administrator for those districts with rural schools, because it's difficult to ask an administrator to travel all day rather than be in the school.
So if I could just clarify on that, Cary is our remote school. It meets the qualifications of a remote school. And we have a full-time principal there already. But what it would allow us to do is to get from the state more of the funds to have that full-time principal there rather than paying it out of our own pocket like we do now.
That would be nice.
I actually just had an idea about these things. So there's 11 of them. Each comes with an ISBA recommendation, 2 pass, don't pass, or no recommendation.
Mhm.
I think the ones that do pass will probably be hard to knock down, but I think as a group we may want to look at the ones that say no recommendation or no pass. And do we agree with ISBA or disagree in those cases? Chances are if they say do pass, then they're probably pretty well agreed on by a large group of people. Because there's one about testing and the SBAC test versus the ISAT test, and it's like,
Those are the same thing.
what do we do about that? Is that, what's our opinion on that? Because that's the no recommendation one, right?
Mhm.
And then there's also the one, I think the lot tax is also...
The local option sales tax.
Is a no recommendation one as well, right? So they're pretty much ambivalent, so they're looking for direction. I don't know how we feel as a group about that. Bless you guys with taking that one on. Those are just the things I noticed in that.
This is the same resolution that came before the general body last year, which failed last year. One of the main components, and it was very heavily debated at that ISBA business session, one of the biggest things that I took from that, for us, it would be very beneficial. It would help us.
Which
Or-
resolution? I'm sorry.
It would be resolution number 3, the
Three.
local option sales tax for
Oh,
school
okay.
construction. It would be very beneficial for us and for some of the larger areas such as Twin Falls, Lewiston, Coeur d'Alene, the bigger metropolises. Where it would hurt would be the smaller, more rural school districts.
Dietrich would not be a fan of that.
Exactly. Where does Dietrich go to shop? Down to Twin. So Dietrich taxpayers would be paying
For Twin.
for Twin schools. And therein lies the disagreement on the executive board. And my own personal feeling is, even though we're a resort community and we would get a lot of outside funding, I still find that we have a lot of commuters that work out of, or that live out of district, that still commute to here, buy here, shop here, eat here, and that would be putting part of the tax burden on them, who are already struggling for finding funding mechanisms.
I think we're heavy on lot to begin with as well, so you tack more on there. It's kind of, that's why I thought there's a couple in here that probably, I do not want to belabor this meeting, but
So,
I don't know what our stand is worth in the overall framework of conversation either.
if I remember correctly, Blaine County School District gets 400.
It was, that one was close enough last year that every vote counts.
Yeah.
Okay.
At the same time, we shouldn't be under a lot of illusions that the legislature is going to take these to heart. Will do whatever they want to do.
And to be completely truthful as well, there was a member of the taxation committee in attendance. The senators and legislators were at the ISBA region meeting, and he flat out said that even if that lot passes, the chances of it passing in the legislature are slim to none.
Right. Well, that hit them right square. So The testing one, I think, is an interesting one, too. I mean, where do we stand on that one, right? Like, do we want to give them more choice? The what do you call it, resolution is about somewhat more parental right and freedom in the testing protocol and the choice to do it. Do we want to be in favor of that or not? I mean, and that may not, the legislature may have less, when it comes to dollars and cents, I'm sure they're paying tight attention. I mean, tell me to stop.
If I could speak
too
to
deep
this
into these
resolution, this is Resolution 10 from Boise, and there's 3 pieces to it. One is to eliminate the requirement that students pass a high-stakes college readiness assessment prior to graduating. That's something Idaho did to Idaho. That's not a federal requirement. We put that on ourselves. Same thing to ensure that students are not required to take the No Child Left Behind assessments outside of grade levels required by the federal government. We added an addition, as a state, we added an additional grade at the high school level. We did that to ourselves. That's not a federal requirement. My personal opinion is I can easily support both of those. The third one, though, is prior to the conclusion of the SBAC, which is also the ISAT-2, depends on who's talking, on what term they're using.
Yeah.
Prior to the conclusion of the SBAC contract, create criteria for the adoption of a test that satisfies federal standards, provides consistent, detailed feedback about academic strengths and weaknesses based on the Idaho core standards to students, parents, and teachers, and can be administered in a reasonable amount of time. And I know the Boise School District feels like that they're not getting any data from the district. And I said as much that we're getting good data that we're able to use in informing our instruction. And I maybe shouldn't have said that because now they'll be recruiting Marcia. But the piece that bothers me a little bit about this one is I would, if I were writing it, I would want to amend it to say that we try to make the current assessment better to meet this, just because I know in the world of assessment, since that was a former life I lived in, because these are high-stake assessments, they have to stand up in a court of law, because otherwise we're denying a child a right to education. And so they have to be incredibly valid and incredibly reliable. And to do that requires lots of time, lots of field testing, lots of test writing, and so the tests we have cost millions of dollars. And so if we create a new one, we're going to be putting millions of dollars more into it that will be used at the state level to create these tests instead of passed on to school districts. So I would like to amend that, but I can't. Boise's the one that submitted it, to say, try to make what we have do what we want it to do instead of
Create a whole new.
start all over.
Yeah.
And I don't know that they're saying start all over either. I just don't really understand what they're saying in item C, I guess.
So with the open meeting law and all of this, is it possible for the 3 of you who aren't attending this to give me your opinions on these 3? Is
We
that
could give Amanda our opinions, and then we could probably
As long as they do it
pitch them off to you.
independently.
Yeah.
independently? Because I would love feedback from what you 3 think, if I am a voice.
I mean, we do have a
vote.
voice, and even as Trustee Schwertel said, you know, they're going to do what they're going to do. It's our duty to be heard.
Right.
On
And
every
you do have
issue
2 votes
that
there,
impacts
so.
the education of kids in this valley.
Right. Okay.
So, all right, so if you have feelings one way or the other, please get those to Amanda for our use at the ISBA business meeting. So, all right. That brings us to the second section of public comment, and it looks like we do have some. And turn the time over to Marie Wolfram.
Thank you, Chairman Williams, trustees. I just want to address a few issues that I've heard been discussed in the public and at this meeting. First of all, with regards to the addition of a treasurer, the BCA has worked very closely with Mike Chatterton over the years. He's been very open and very helpful at explaining the budget anytime we've needed his assistance. And he's open to anyone who asks. And in fact, we kind of have a running joke about how I'm a real visual learner. I need to see things on a wall, on a spreadsheet. And Mike's really, really great at showing us The money trail. So the proposed position of a treasurer adds administrative costs to the district's budget while not directly benefiting students. And I want to challenge you to remember that we are here for students. And if it's not going to directly benefit students in Blaine County, is it a necessary position? We would also like to remind the board that you have paid the previous superintendent $600,000 not to do a job. And that was a very tough decision, we know, but that is one in which has contributed to our current financial situation as a school district. And so by adding more administrative positions, I don't think that we can afford it. And I would really challenge you to think seriously about that treasurer position. Also, teachers have received raises in the last few years. However, none of our raises have kept up with the current cost of living. And in fact, we have cut our health benefits in order to keep this district continuing to be solvent. So I would again ask you, is this a position that will benefit students and help students in Blaine County? I don't believe a treasurer position would do that. I also want to speak to the AVID costs. Quick Google search. AVID costs a district, and these are their national costs that they have estimated for this 2015-2016 school year, $30,000 a year per district, close to that, and that's servicing only 30 kids. So again, if we're here to benefit students and the most amount of students, is that the way to go? I'm not entirely sure it is. Finally, decisions regarding the Finance Committee and the Policy Committee. You're cutting teachers and staff out of the process. We are educators who are expert professionals in our field. We understand the institutions that we work in and the students that we work with. We work with your policies every day. In fact, your website is not entirely up to date, and I'm one of the people that often tells your webmasters and your HR department that your policies are outdated and should not be on the website anymore. We are also community members who own homes, pay taxes, have children in these schools, have had children in these schools, or will have children in these schools, and we vote. So please consider keeping us part of this process, adding administrative programs, cutting us out of the process, and doesn't make friends. And I would just ask you to remember that, and please keep students first. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the decision portion of the agenda. And the consent agenda reads as follows. We have item 1, consideration of minutes, regular board meeting September 8, regular September board meeting September 8th, 2015, regular meeting for Zone 2 interview September 24th, 2015, special meeting September 30th, 2015, the acceptance of monthly financial report, payment of bills, permission to publish annual financial statement summary, consideration of practicum for student for Christine Storr under the direction of Joel Zellers, Wood River High School special education teacher, application for study travel by student group Wood River High School baseball team by Mr. John Raid, activity director, application for study travel by student group Wood River High School baseball team, never mind, I already said that. Application for study travel by student group Wood River High School Voices 2, Mr. Jamie Ellison. Application for study travel by student group Wood River High School debate team, Susan Wurst, speech debate. Application and consideration of personnel exiting and entering. And Ms. LaChance, if you would please read those.
Classified staff exiting: Jody Palmer, paraprofessional, Bellevue Elementary. Mariska Mann, paraprofessional, Haley Elementary. Recommending for hire: Heidi Thompson, paraprofessional, Bellevue Elementary. Amanda Christ, ASD, paraprofessional, Haley Elementary. Shannon Meza, Human Resource Manager, District Office.
All right. Thank you for finishing that up. Is there a motion regarding the consent agenda?
Do we want to look at the debate team and their travel as far as supervision goes as a separate item, or should we keep that on there? Do we know the male and female chaperones for male and female trip? one thing to consider, I think, with their request.
My personal recommendation would be to pull that and discuss that one separately and pass a consent agenda with items 1 through 6 and item 8, and item 7 separate. So do I hear the
I'd like to
motion?
move that. I'm moving that.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion? All in favor of passing items 1 through 6 and item number 8 in the consent agenda? Aye.
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 I'll abstain.
Any opposed? Okay. Which brings us to item number 7, the application for study travel by student group, Woodriver High School debate team by Susan Wurst. And I have the same concerns as you. There are male students going, and there is not a male chaperone designated. I would be willing to pass that on the contingency that there is a male chaperone going as per our policy.
Okay. Can we ask staff how that's working?
Ms. Wurst,
Yeah.
this afternoon, she couldn't be here this evening, but there are 2 males that are willing to chaperone on that. She is going jointly with another team that has male coaches, both the lead and the assistant, as well as the bus driver who stepped up and is willing to help with the supervision duties in the male section, on the male side of that. So, I mean, if you look at the number of male supervisors going or adults going, I think she meets the criteria for it.
So then why don't we move that we approve that request contingent upon the fact that there will be a guarantee of male supervision on the trip?
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. And brings us to item B, approval of the comprehensive annual financial report and annual report to the State Department of Education. And there's a little presentation by Mr. Dennis Brown and Mr. Brady Workman.
Good evening. I'm Brady Workman. I'm a CPA in Twin Falls, and I work for Dennis Brown Accounting. We've been contracted to perform the audit of the district for the fiscal year ending 2015. Just a couple of comments I want to make on it, and we'll flip through some pages. Any questions you have, please let me know, as we can discuss this together. First of all, if we can turn to page 3 of the report. Page 2 and 3 of the report is our audit report to the district based on the financial statements. Page 3 at the top in the opinion section says, in my opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the government activities, the business type activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of Blaine County School District. That's a really long sentence for saying you have an unmodified opinion, which is our highest level of opinion we can give. So receiving the highest level is obviously what we strive to do in all audits, and that's what you received. There are a few changes to the audit reports that happened this year. If we flip a few more pages back to page 18, we'll see the main change for the year. A new government standard came out. And about 2/3 of the way down, we see a line item for a net pension liability. This number is now on the face of the financial statements. It's always been a liability to the district. It's now listed on the financial statements. This is a number that says, based off of current situations, if all current teachers, staff, and everyone were to retire, here's how much we owe the retirement system to cover that. This number is given to us from Percy in a complicated equation. There's a 5-page footnote that goes along with it this year, just to try to explain what we're doing. like I said, this is a number that's always been there. It's now just required on there. There's been a lot of attention, a lot of media on this number, so I just want to bring it to your attention. That's where it is. It's 5.1 million for the district, which is a percentage of the total unfunded liability for PERSI throughout the state. It's just your allotted percentage of it. If we can flip back quite a few pages now, we're going to go back to page 69. This is a budget to actual form. So it's comparing what we budgeted to receive and what we budgeted to spend compared to how we actually received our money and spent our money. According to the budget, we received about $460,000 more than we budgeted for, and we spent significantly less than we budgeted to spend. These are great financial measures. I challenge you to constantly look at the budget, compare what on a monthly basis or however often you receive this. Look at how we're doing compared to the budget. It's a great tool to use in this financial report that's lengthy and sometimes overwhelming of what we read. One of the last comments I have to make to you is as a board, part of our audit entails us to read every board meeting's minutes. What we're doing is looking for financial section information, one of which is your consent agenda. We like reading that you guys have questions on the monthly bills that are proposed. Your oversight on the monthly bills is a very crucial part on the internal control structure of a district. So I applaud you for those questions that we read that come up in the minutes and challenge you to continue to do that. That's a crucial part of our internal control structure in the district. That's kind of obviously very brief overview of the audit. I'd open up to any questions or comments anyone would have.
Absolutely. I first of all want to say thank you for your work. We just listened to quite a few public comments tonight regarding the financial position of this organization, this company, and how there were there was allusions to misrepresentations and this kind of malpractice and this sort of very innuendoed but challenging to us as a board, right? Like we need to be paying attention. So first of all, I want to thank you for your fine work here as I spent last night reading this entire audit report and didn't put me to sleep. It was actually, I tried, but it didn't work. And so I just want to commend you on your work, first of all, because every bit of information that everyone's asking for exists within this report. And the first thing I'd like you to address for the public, I'm sorry the whole public isn't here, but to address to the public is your management letter and what your findings were for this year's audit of the district.
Yeah, so the management letter, internal control letter that I think you're alluding to, we're going to go right near the end of the report, page 144. It's one of the letters that we provide over internal control. When we do a financial statement audit, we are not auditing the internal control policies and procedures of the district. We do testing, random sampling, review of minutes, various activities that give us a pretty good idea of what your internal control structure is. We interview staff to determine what policies are in place, what procedures need to be followed. Then in our testing, we make sure they happen. In the 2 years we've done the audit, we've never found a deficiency. Everything that we have tested is following procedure. So that's a great thing. That means our internal controls are working. That's what obviously we like to see. We do not give an opinion on that because we did not test your internal controls. We tested elements of your internal control. Okay, so that I think that's what you're alluding to. We have not found any deficiencies that our auditing standards call deficiencies, which is something that would cause a concern to the organization if not found. Deficiencies can always happen, but if they're found in a reasonable time and fixed, that's the whole point of the process. So we have not found any deficiencies or compliance deficiencies within when we do a single audit on federal funds, we also test for compliance of those funds. And there have not been any deficiencies arise.
Could you give examples of deficiencies? I mean, just
Sure.
because I'm new.
Yeah, so a lot of times we'll do a random sampling of expenses that the district has. So if you think on your consent agenda, how many checks you've written, we're going to sample a number of those randomly. If we don't see purchase orders, if we don't see approvals on items, then because we're just doing a sampling, we then test a whole lot more. We have yet to come up with one of those. So maybe it's a fluke that all of them work, but I'm going to say, because of our sampling, that internal control works. Everything's being approved and followed by the procedures there. We've looked at the way cash is handled in school lunches and then deposited into accounts. Various things, and we try to change what we look at each year so that staff does not get used to what we're looking at and know that. So we change our tests each year to find a possible deficiency.
And as far as material weakness and significant deficiency, those aren't even on the table because you found no
Right.
independent deficiencies.
Those are more in-depth deficiencies. A deficiency is kind of just real basic. It could be we didn't find an approval signed on an invoice. It may not be a big deal. We go get an approval and find that it's okay. A material one is going to say this deficiency is so big that it could have a material or change our outlook on the financial statements. So if we don't find the basic ones, then we're safe to assume we're not going to find the big ones either.
So it's safe to assume from what your management letter states is that we are absolutely clean in your opinion as an auditor.
Correct. We have not found anything that would state otherwise. The internal control, in our opinion, is working correctly.
So if there was the need or the question for a independent party within our staffing arrangement to exert external control over what's currently business procedure of the district, would really be an ineffective use of manpower given the cleanliness of what you found in your audit.
Yeah. My smirk is kind of, I need to stay really independent on what I'm doing as an auditor. I need to be independent. What we found is your internal control structure as exists right now works very well and very efficiently with the division of responsibilities between staff and the oversight there. It is working efficiently and effectively. Yes.
Thank you.
You bet.
So your purview is strictly looking at whether the rule is being followed, not qualitative in terms of is the rule being followed and something additional being done in terms of cost savings. You're not looking at it and saying we're spending X amount on books and that's 3 times more than anyone else.
Correct. We're doing our opinion based off the presentation of financial statements, not, let's say, where the use of the money went to. We're making sure that the money that was spent is recorded and presented correctly, not if we used it in what we consider is the right way or another district considers the right way. That budget process, that form that compares what was spent to the budget, when the budget's approved, that's what we would now look at, whether it's salaries, benefits, or support services, or whatever it is. We are just comparing is what was approved and what was recorded done correctly, not the idea behind it.
Right. Okay, thank you. So you would have no opinion between, for example, and this has not happened this year that I know of, but for example, a large group of staff staying in a 5-star hotel versus something that's much less for a period of time. You would have no opinion about that because that's not your purview.
Correct. We would look at if the approval was done correctly. Yes, that's where our financial statement audit comes into play.
And also you would find that if that was within the constraint of the budget or not. that was approved.
If it goes over a budget, one of the reasons we test that budget to actual statement, and it's quite condensed into a one-page for presentation. As you know, your budget is considerably larger than one page, and we look at it that way. We're looking to know what's standing out. Where did we spend on this line item so much more than budget, and why? Then we determine, was there an approval, was there an amended budget, whatever that reason was, and that's what we're testing.
In speaking to the form of approval as such, within the conversations that we heard tonight, there was question of approvals. And really, and you have to answer this question for me, is that all the approvals of any financial expenditure of this district at pretty much any level, are those approvals are really board-driven approvals versus a staff-driven approval. Is that correct?
The final approval is done through that consent agenda approval, yes.
Okay.
And that's what we're looking at the minutes to look at. Staff can approve purchase orders, they can approve that these things happen, but the final approval does rest here, and that's...
With this body here.
Correct.
Thank you.
Do you guys address or follow like general ledger with, moving money from, say something was duplicated and they make a general ledger to, I'm sorry if I'm using that term incorrectly, but I think you would know what I mean when,
A journal entry.
Journal
maybe.
entry, correct.
Moving money without we do test journal entries. One thing that's unique about government accounting is fund accounting, where we have specific funds. A federal fund is different than a general fund in various things, and we cannot do journal entries between funds without doing a transfer or something, and then transfer is another one that we test.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have, as a board member, I've had trouble with, and I'd like to hear any of your opinions on this, with retroactively approving bills that I don't have. We would take days and days to go back and say, oh, what was this $30,000 worth of credit card receipts for, that kind of thing. So I'm being asked on one hand to have the 30,000-foot view, and then on the other hand, this is a philosophical question, but maybe you've come across it, I don't know. On the other hand, I'm being asked to micromanage expenses with my approval. So the buck stops with me, but it doesn't stop with me because I'm only able to retroactively approve things that have already been done. So I'm having a hard time with the accusation of, well, you're micromanaging, but at the same time, I'm being asked to vouch for all these little tiny expenses that it would take me 40 hours a week to go through every single receipt. So what's your opinion about that?
I would have a lot of trust in my staff. For instance, you brought up the credit card one, and a purchase card that gets used for multiple small things. The staff needs to reconcile that like it's a bank account every month. So just because I'm using a purchase card to buy a small item would not mean I don't need to keep a receipt for it. So at some point that $30,000 expense is going to have a stack of receipts behind it that need to be reconciled for the approval of each of those for your overall approval of the expense. I don't know if I would say you need to be the one going out and verifying each of those receipts, but that's where a competent staff and the procedures you have in place to follow the internal control says this $30,000 credit card receipt or invoice has a whole stack of receipts under it. It's been reconciled, and each of those have been approved, now given to you for the final approval.
And in your testing, you determined that that internal control was in place and well executed by our organization.
Yeah. Purchase cards, for example, are ones that get a little extra scrutiny because they're easy to not have a receipt with them. I've audited entities that have a full-time staff person just for reconciling and chasing down receipts on purchase cards. Now they have multiple purchase cards and a large dollar amount of them, and so they want to make sure they're not being mishandled. But yes, those are ones that get tested, probably a little more because they typically have a little higher risk associated with them.
Do you know if our school district was tested for that particular?
Those will always show up in our random sample.
Okay.
So we will randomly test some of those. We don't look at every month of them, but they will. If they don't show up in the random test, our audit judgment says we're going to add them to our random test because of the inherent risk that comes with it.
All right. Do I hear a motion then to accept the approval of the comprehensive annual financial report and annual report to the State Department of Education?
That was, there's something in there actually that this doesn't apply to you, so I didn't want to ask you. Before we get to that, there was a section in here that we're still talking about growth in the school district of amounts 2.1% that have no bearing on recent history. And in fact, I had talked to a professional demographer a few years ago, and they said past 10 years earlier, it does not make a bit of difference how fast your school district grew. It's like talking about what was the weather in winter and trying to predict the weather tomorrow. You don't do that because it doesn't have any bearing. It's the more recent history, and that's why linear regressions are used in projections of enrollment. And I've brought this up for a long time because it was used as the justification for a $60 million levy and a new middle school by 2013, plus a new elementary school by 2013. That was in the plant and facility. This was in the original plant and facility committee meetings. So I think that needs to be struck out of there because it gives a false impression of growth that doesn't exist. There's also a statement in there that says something about if we continue to grow at the present rate, we'll have to go out for money from the public. And I think that's a conclusion that someone in the district made that I'm not understanding why that was made. The board hasn't talked. We're in the process of talking about that. It's a huge decision whether to cut or to go out for a levy. And yet in this financial report, it acts like it's a foregone conclusion that we're going to have to go out for a levy. So I had a problem with the beginning part of this financial statement, the economic condition and outlook, and the profile of the district.
Do those have page numbers, or are those?
VI and the...
Those aren't his work.
That's right. That's why I said I want to talk to him about it.
I was going to say, can I ask, are you talking about district, I'm on page Roman numeral 5. Enrollment has increased at an average rate of 2.1 annually since I just about turned it all around, 1980-81 school year. Over this period of time, enrollment increases followed the local cost of residential housing. For the past several years, the enrollment of the school district has been very stable. The school district has a few different charter and private schools who have grown and started over the past year. We have not grown at the 30-year average of 2.1, but are aware that averages may catch up.
Right.
So, and you're interpreting that as we're saying we're going to continue to grow at that rate? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, that's exactly what the pattern has been in the past, and in fact, the estimate that was given to the levy committee, and this was only 5 years ago, was that our enrollment by 2019-20, based on a straight line from going back to 1980, which was, as I said, it did not adhere to any kind of professional demographer's reckoning of how that would be done in a professional manner that would have meaning. Estimated that our school enrollment would be above 4,500. We're over 1,000 less than that right now. So I believe that some of the figures were put on there, the estimates were made for reasons other than estimated accuracy. I brought this up repeatedly, that this did not conform to any kind of modeling that was out there. and it was dismissed. And then when I see this coming again to the financial report, it's very difficult to understand why. And then when you see the conclusion down here, we are anticipating, hold on one second, I didn't highlight it. But at any rate, the statement that I made before about the district, if enrollment keeps going at the rate it is, will have to go out for a levy or for money for the public.
Can you find that? Because I don't remember.
Yeah, are you quoting the
a
document?
statement where it says if enrollment continues to grow.
Yeah. Okay, it's in economic condition and outlook. If the present student-to-teacher ratios are to be maintained, the district in the future will need to obtain additional revenue.
Is that inaccurate?
That's assuming that we don't cut costs out of the classroom. That's making an assumption, and I have a problem with that assumption. I don't think we've talked about it. In fact, I think that that's the purpose of some of these budget meetings.
Sorry.
Can I address that? This letter is intended for me to express my opinions of what I see going on in the district to the Board of Trustees. That's the intent of this letter. This is what's happening. This is what's gone on for a lot of years. This is what I see coming. It's just for me to notify you guys of what I see happening.
So would it be a more accurate statement to say if the present budget configuration is to be maintained, the district in the future will have to obtain additional resources?
I guess that
because that
assumes that we're going to be spending in the same pots as we have before.
Because that's why we're having the conversation with the community. Because if we continue on the course that we're on, we're going to cross.
That's an accurate statement.
The question will be, at that juncture, do we need more money or do we spend less money?
That's the question. Do we increase our revenues or decrease our expenditures?
That's a fair question.
That's what these meetings are all about.
That's my assumption of going into this whole meeting process.
Exactly.
You know, and it's not a definitive. It's not a definitive of no levy. It's not a definitive of firing people.
Exactly.
It's not definitive. So to have opinion stated in there that we don't have enough money to cover the end is fair. I don't have a significant problem with that. I don't even view it as a gross assumption.
The problem comes with the problem also comes from me with the track record of what's happened before in terms of expecting that we're going to be growing astronomically, and that has not panned out, and that did not conform to any kind of professional demographic, and the district was told, and it was used as a marketing tool. So I have problems with that.
Well, I would have to say that that was an unfortunate occurrence. I don't see any allusion in here to grand growth of any population within the community.
Well, 2.1%. That's when you start to connect the dots, the inference there is 2.1% is a reputable figure to look at.
60 kids up or down?
No, it's 1,000 over.
We have 3,300
It's compounded.
kids. 3,300 kids. 2% of 3,300 kids is 60 kids.
It's compounded.
Is it
So
600 kids?
do you understand?
Tell me the math here.
Do you understand how that? I mean, it's compounded, and that's why Mike got a figure of 4,500 by the year 2019. It's off by a huge order of magnitude. When I showed it to the demographer, this is Davis Demographics out in California, they just laughed. They couldn't believe it. And in fact, in California, there's a list of 4 demography firms that you must go to because this has been because this has happened before. School districts have misrepresented growth, got into terrible problems with overbuilding, and gone bust.
We haven't overbuilt, correct?
That's a matter of opinion.
We have no new buildings.
That's a matter of opinion. In the last 10 years, that's a matter of opinion. And that's an opinion that some people in this district, I think, would take issue with. I think that that's the problem with the levy. I think that just...
Well, we haven't asked for one yet.
No,
But
I'm saying the previous one. That was the problem with the previous levy.
Well, and
Is $60 million, and what do we have to show for it? The high school cost didn't even cost $30 million. So it gets into a philosophical, and possibly we should have a workshop about this, because it is a big issue, and it's kind of an elephant in the room.
So are you contending we put 800 and plus kids back in this building?
Did I say that? I was talking about the $60 million levy.
Well, that's what goes in.
No,
All right.
it's not. The
Yeah,
$60 million levy.
I hear you on that one, and I guess I would take
No,
that
no.
one back to what we got from the auditor, is that $60 million levy wasn't, it was voted on, but that was approved by us.
The Board
I
of
wasn't here,
Trustees.
but it was put to the taxpayers by us.
Right, and we
Right?
have to...
So we have to live with that, and we have been
Exactly.
saying other people have been responsible, but I don't see the responsibility falling on other people other than who sat at this table at whatever time that was.
Right, and we need to
So-
learn from that.
I think I've already learned.
Well, that's
So
great.
it's like,
Yeah,
I'm, as he said, responsible for making decisions, of all financial decisions for this district. I'm going to be very careful in making those decisions, and I'm going to be informed in making those decisions. That's my oath that Cammie just took tonight, right? I think that's really important to take to heart.
So, I
And
liked
I
your
can-
new, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, I liked, before I lose my train of thought, I really liked Gwen Carroll's rephrasing of this sentence. It would be, okay, from my point of view, you like the sentence, if the present student-to-teacher ratios are to be maintained, the district in the future will need to obtain additional revenue. What if we said that, we'll need to cut costs? You probably wouldn't like that any more than I would. So I think
I'm
that...
fine with saying both, either
Or-
raise revenue
Or,
cut
and
costs.
or, you can say it that way too, it doesn't matter.
It's going to be a blend of both, so at the end of the day, so that's fine.
Just so that we are on the same page, understanding.
Yeah, I'm with that.
Okay. And I don't know how you phrased it, I don't mind that phrasing either, but just to get it out there, that the cost cutting comes in there to that. It's not always about going out for new levies.
And I would agree, and I don't think increasing revenues is just about going about for new levies either.
We'll talk about that.
I think there's other avenues to increase revenues, such as average daily attendance, where we have a great deal of students who miss a tremendous amount of school, and we miss out on a tremendous amount of money from the state because of that. So to say that our only source of revenue is to go out for a levy, I disagree with inherently. And so I would be acceptable personally to discussing, in addition to finding new sources of revenue, to saying cut costs. I think that's very plausible, feasible, and with that adjustment, I'm prepared to move forward.
There are revenue captures. If we get our attendance
All
up
right,
to
so
95%.
I'll read it again, what I scribbled
we
in
gain
here.
600,000.
If the present budget structures are to be maintained, the district in the future will need to attain additional revenue.
I liked yours better. What do you think, Tammy?
Obtain additional revenue or cut costs is what we
Well,
Yeah, that makes it more
Is
clear.
that bad?
Or reduce expenditures.
then
Reduce expense.
then you're changing the budget structures, but that's okay.
I think that's what we originally talked about, was those were our options, and they may be a blend of those options, but they may not be a blend of those options, but that's what's on the table, and I think that that's to make it clearer, the clearest way possible.
All right, let me read it one more time. If the present budget structures are to be maintained, the district in the future will need to obtain additional revenue and/or cut
And/or.
costs. I've got
I think the and/or. Yeah, no, I'm nodding. I think the
okay.
and/or is good.
Are we comfortable approving with the said
modification
modification?
on page 6, Roman numeral 6, excuse me.
I would like to have some input that maybe having an economist, somebody who looks strictly at economies, not
auditors. I mean, because they're not economists, that's a different kind of training. So I think an economist who can take a look at our community in particular, because we are a unique community. We are a resort community. We are not the same as Twin Falls. We're not the same as Boise. And other communities of the same size are probably not dealing with the same issues or uniqueness that we have as a resort city. So I think an economist who can come in and give us some good numbers to look at, real numbers that they could predict because that is their line of business, would be more appropriate.
What are you saying, as far as like assumptions?
Yeah, assumptions, yes, for the future, just because, I mean, these are numbers that could be sustainable, but these are an auditor who, and I, sorry, not to disparage anybody, but an economist has a different kind of training, and I know that there's different kind of training, so they could look at things a little bit differently and probably better predict, if I could talk, what we could be looking at. Just as far as the community as a whole, and possibly what we could look at as far as a school district as well.
We could certainly invite Harry Griffith from the Sun Valley Economic Development Group, because that's what they do in this valley, is try to figure out what are the valid assumptions.
I just wanted, so my degree is in economics, and I worked in economics for years. That's what I did, was projections, and I did it when the bottom line was the dollar. Either you made or you lost. You were mark to market every day, but that at the end of the year, that was what counted. So that's, I think, why this hit home so much when I saw this kind of this kind of treatment of projections going on. It was very difficult. It was very difficult. So I brought it up, and I brought it up, and I brought it up, and it didn't make any difference, and now I see it on there, and that's probably why I'm having an issue with that.
And just having an impartial third party take a look at it would probably be better.
I think that needs to be, needs some clarification in this conversation. That's historical. This is not making any inferences into the future. This is stating what has happened in the past, and I don't think that's fair for you to say that this is a rehash of what happened previously. I don't read that into this at all. This says historically there's been 2.1% growth since 1981. That's actually right in line with what you just said. You just said that it was extrapolated out at 16% growth or going to 4,000. The 2% growth is probably correct. It was probably 2,800 kids in 81, and now there's 3,300.
There was far less than that.
I think I'm not far off, actually.
You're far less. It was 1,700 or so, even something like that, less.
But that growth statement here is relatively accurate, and you're bringing into this conversation things that predate this but are not in this report.
That have no relevance, and that's the problem. To the untrained eye, the untrained eye, they have relevance, but in fact, they don't have relevance. And that's what I kept bringing up. These have no relevance, and they put a figure in people's heads that has no relevance, and in fact, gives you wildly misleading enroll estimates. And enroll estimates are the foundation of any good planning in terms of buildings, and that's the basis on which districts spend tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. Since 2000, we have passed in this district $100 million worth of levies. That's incredibly huge amount of money. So it's very important to get this right. The other thing I wanted to say is just throwing this out there, when I was at community school on that board, I was on the economic committee, and I worked with Harry Griffith, and I agree totally that it needs to have, because economists, they might not always be right, but they bring the qualitative. They're not looking in the present. They're looking in the future. They're basing it on the past. They're doing a lot of things to get the best projection possible. And that's more an art than a science. And what you do is a science, I think, more than an art.
Correct. In this letter, as Mike said, is an opinion that he has written. It is not an audited letter. That's why it's before our audit report. We have not audited those numbers or it's an opinion that he gave based off of current situation, and I think that opinion is the key word in there.
All right. Do I hear a motion to approve the comprehensive audit with the,
Can we take out those numbers that I've been talking about the 3.1?
it's a person's opinion. It's potato. It's our business manager treasurer has the opinion that this is what has happened,
Right.
and it's one man's opinion. I don't see how taking it out would gain us anything.
You see, right here, it says Governing Board of Trustees, and we're the buck stops with us on the accuracy of what is said in here, and that's why I care.
I'm not comfortable taking it out. I apologize. I trust Mike's opinion.
That's fine. I think that we need to go around and maybe ask people
Please do.
how they stand.
And that's what the motion would be the opportunity to do, is to be able to accept that as is with the amendment.
Changing the language.
With the change that on page 6.
Roman numeral 6.
Was already had buy-in from the majority of the board, from my estimation. So with that amendment, and that amendment only, do I hear a motion to accept the approval of the comprehensive annual financial report and annual report to the State Department of Education?
I move to approve
Whatever he
the
just
report.
said.
I move what you said.
To
To
change the
approve,
language.
with the
way-
changed language, I move to approve the comprehensive report and the report that will be filed with the state.
Okay. And I'm comfortable with that. I would second that.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll abstain since I didn't have enough time to review and feel comfortable voting on that.
Any opposed? Motion passes 3-1. Brings us to item number 13, items the board deems necessary.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hearing none.
Okay, yeah. As the meeting went on, I started to think about the financial committee and how important it is to have a viable financial committee during this, especially during this time where we're leading up to the budget. And I am wondering if the board would entertain the idea, and it would be a very brief meeting, and people could call in, so it would be quick, to suggest moving forward on that. I could work on the policy, put it out there, to vote it up or down, and then we have 5 weeks from today till the next meeting, to the next board meeting. So to vote it up or down with a few changes, especially the ones that were mentioned tonight, and then to put in our names for the committee, and then anyone else who wanted to be voted on as an at-large member. And then we'd be ready to go on November 17th, which is well into this. I mean, we'd have all that information from all the budget meetings, and we'd be able to hit the ground running with a truly independent committee that we could benefit from.
So what, you're asking for a meeting, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm asking for a special meeting in the next few days, maybe, even on Friday. It could be very brief. I could come up with the wording for the financial policy. It would be just
to get
what
it
I said
approved.
tonight. Yeah, get it approved, and then we would all be thinking about who do we want to, each one of us put in for that committee, and anyone else who puts in that we don't pick, we can vote on as being an at-large member at the November meeting. And then we're ready to go. I don't see, I feel like it's just that, it's important to get going.
Because otherwise we have to wait till the next board meeting. Well, I'd be fine with that. If we could find a time when we can all do it.
And as I said, we can call, people can call in, and it wouldn't be a long meeting. If, for example, I have no idea on Friday if we've got any time on our calendars, but just so that we can get going.
Can I ask, the posting requirements for having that document done and getting it posted would be the end of today tomorrow, or end of the day tomorrow? And that's if you did it Friday.
24 hours?
And that's also Carrie's homecoming. So
I was going to say, personally
don't
speaking,
rain on their parade.
I
So
don't
Monday.
see the possibility of that. And Monday starts the budget meetings that I would like to go listen to what the public has to say. I don't foresee the time between now and the next meeting where that's a possibility, just looking and knowing my own schedule. But that's my opinion and view.
I'm challenged
I'm-
time-wise. I
I'm
hooked up a lot of
confident.
dates next week for being in these budget hearings.
I'm comfortable
playing
and
hooky.
confident with
Yeah.
the community members that we currently have on our financial committee. I think that the information that we garner at these next few weeks will be critically important, and that I also believe that we'll have enough time at the November meeting to be able to get that back to the financial committee if that does change. So I'm comfortable with the current process we have in place.
We've just heard from a bunch of people from the community. We've gotten letters from people from the community. We've heard about this topic for years now, and I would, we talked about it, and it wasn't on the agenda for tonight.
When you refer to this topic, please be specific.
Sure. I'm sorry, the financial committee, well, exactly, the financial committee and how we need to, what is the composition? Are we talking about a independent committee? Are we not talking about an independent committee? And in terms of who's on it and how does it report? And so I think that we need to revisit that. And I think that we heard loud and clear, we talked about it tonight. And the problem is that we're under, I think it really helps our district, it helps our board to be able to hear the recommendations of a truly independent committee, and I don't think it can wait.
I heard from the public comment tonight some pretty significant appeal to be a little more broad in the structure of this committee from the head of the Teachers Association. And that's not an insignificant point, in my opinion. That was a pretty strong request for consideration of that group as well, and rightfully so. So for us just to say, hey, we're just going to pick a bunch of ad hoc people from the community, I think is probably, this requires much more crafting and consideration than the snap to let's get it done next week kind of thing. That was a very strong statement to me, and I feel that those people are in charge of our kids, and they feel they need a voice. I have kids in the school system. I respect what they said. I'm concerned about that. And that's not in any of this equation that's being spelled out right now that you're asking to get pushed ahead.
Right. Okay, and I understand that. No one is saying that the teachers don't have a voice in this district. The difference is, where's the reporting? The reporting is to Gwen Carroll on committees that staff wants input on. That's the report. That should be the reporting tree. When the public wants input into financial matters, the reporting tree goes directly to us. We need to be listening. We need to be listening in an organized fashion so that we're hearing, just like we're doing with the school advisory committees, so we're hearing direct information from impartial sources, independent sources in the community who don't have, and frankly, I'll put it out there, who don't have their boss sitting next to them at the table.
Wouldn't that be the opportunity, though, to be on an independent committee without your boss sitting next to you? A great opportunity to voice your opinion?
No, because Gwen Carroll's on the committee, and it doesn't, it blurs the lines there. We are the voice of the public. We are not the voice of the staff.
I didn't get that in the proposal that you made that Gwen Carroll was on the committee. I thought it was going to be independent parties with yourself and Mike as advisors, too, and that was it.
Couldn't we use
I'm talking about the
teachers?
now.
Couldn't
wanna
we
change it,
have
but-
teachers as an advisor as well? So you have the community members, and then you have Mike and the board member and a teacher as an advisor to the committee.
Yeah, I
And
just
still have the independent
feel very
committee.
strongly that that contingent needs representation, because that came across very loud and clear to me, and I do listen to all public comment. That was not something I had heard previously in the multiple public comments
Right.
that I've heard from the normal group of public commentors.
I think this would be a very valid conversation, and I think that needs to happen as with the public here as well, seeing as how we only have couple of members. I appreciate you sticking through with this.
Thank you.
I think it needs to be an agenda topic on a meeting with the public here, and I believe this discussion needs to happen at that time, at that place. I believe this is not the correct time and place to have that, and I would propose that that time and place be on the agenda during the regular November meeting.
And I would propose that it be done sooner than that. And I would also, I like your input about BCEA. You know, fine, have some, you know, if that is an important part of this, there's no reason why that can't be in an advisory position. But it's just, it's like the public would not walk onto a staff committee that answers to Gwen Carroll. It's just, that's not the purpose.
The problem therein lies that the staff are community members, they are taxpayers, and whether or not they answer to Gwen Carroll, if she's not on that committee, she's not overseeing that committee answers to us. That gets into HR laws if there's any retribution from any actions on that.
Right.
So
At the risk of telling my bosses what to do, I just have to say, I'm afraid you're violating the law here, because if the discussion is to have a special meeting or not, that's one thing. But rediscussing the issue when it's not agended and the public did not know it was going to be rediscussed later, you're treading on very thin ground. So the conversation needs to be, special meeting, yes, no, done. Okay.
And we determined that we could have a special meeting or not. People were too busy, or what did we decide?
Let's go around the table.
in my schedule,
I'm
I
open.
don't have the time
I'm
with
open.
everything else going on.
I don't have time next week.
You don't have time.
I've committed my time to the hearings.
So
I think that the week after, because I would also like to be attending those hearings next week as well, that, you know, the week after allows us not to rush into it, but, you know, give
So we're
a little
looking
bit more
at-
flexibility.
Okay, Amanda, would you please get with the board and see what their availability would be for the week of October? It would be the final week of October because the meeting's happening.
26th, the week of the 26th.
All right.
And the board meeting's not till the 17th in
Says the
November,
10th on
so.
mine. Do we have a special date
They
then?
just talked about changing it.
The meeting was changed to the 17th because of travel to ISBA. We changed that at the...
November 17th.
Yeah, so it's later.
All right. With that, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Let you do that.
Meeting adjourned at 9:20.